Good morning, 6 o'clock, Saturday the 30th of September. Today, Conservative MPs demand that taxes are cut before the next election. How much of a storm will this cause ahead of Tory party conference in Manchester?
And there's more misery on the rails as members of ASLEF walk out on strike again today.
Keeping safe on the roads in Northern Ireland as a new scheme for children tours schools.
We like to reinforce and try and come here and build that picture to give these kids a sense of reality of what it's actually like to be involved in these road traffic collisions.
And of course, Aidan has your weather.
It's a bright start for most of us this weekend, but not everyone will see that weather lasting. Find out when and where the rain turns up later today in the full forecast.
And another Aidan has your sport.
Indeed, yeah, fantastic start for Europe at the Ryder Cup in Rome, inspired, of course, by Rory McIlroy. And in boxing, Usyk against Fury is finally on. Details later on.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Are you boring? That's what I want to know.
Is that what you're
Are
asking
you
me?
dull? No.
Oh.
I'm asking you.
Why? What
Because
constitutes
apparently,
being boring or dull?
it's where you live.
Oh.
This is in The Sun this morning, and I don't know why, it's a survey by an online casino. But apparently, the most boring people live in Lincolnshire. Second is Lanarkshire, third Tyne and Wear, fourth is Herefordshire, and fifth is Inverness. So even though gravity...
That's a bit cruel, isn't it?
They've done a survey of people asking when you've met people, the most boring people that you've met in life, where are they from? And Lincolnshire tops the poll with 85% of the vote.
I think that's very cruel. Not everybody in Lincolnshire can be boring.
Least boring, West Midlands. I can sort of see that.
Can you?
Yeah, because Brummies are very...
Forthright.
Forthright and chatty.
Yeah.
So
They
I get
always
that.
say that about countries as well, don't they?
Boring
Canada
countries.
is meant to be a very boring country.
I like Canada.
Canada's beautiful, but they say Canadians are boring. I don't find them so. Got a great branch of the Diamond family living in Canada, and they're not boring.
Mind
But
you,
Canada's got the reputation.
They're quoting Eileen Weston here from Lincoln, who says, we are boring.
Oh.
Well, there you go.
Well, she's a spokesman, is she?
She's a spokesman. So I want to know where you're from. Do you think it's boring where you live? I would say it's quite a cruel thing to say, actually.
Yeah, and anyway, there's no excuse, is there? You can't just say a place is boring. It's what you make of it, isn't it? You can do some
Exactly.
interesting things.
Exactly.
And I want to know about coppicing.
Oh, coppicing,
Coppicing.
right.
That's what they're going to try and do to the tree. Because it's been sort of sliced off in that terrible act of vandalism. This is the tree on Hadrian's Wall, Robin Hood's tree. But apparently it could grow shoots.
Yeah.
And there is a process where woodsmen do a coppicing thing.
Well, coppicing is just cutting trees down, but in a way that they can grow back.
Yes, in a way they can grow back.
Yeah.
So, does anyone know about coppicing? I'd love to hear what that entails and whether you think it actually would work for that tree, because it would be lovely if it could spring back to life somehow.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Anyway, keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.com. It is the day before the Conservative Party conference, and even before the famous faces arrive in Manchester, it's already making headlines.
Yes, because all eyes are on the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, after more than 30 Tory MPs signed a letter to him demanding tax cuts to help struggling families.
Well, this comes as the Institute for Fiscal Studies found the government will have overseen the largest set of tax rises since, and in fact, the highest tax burden since the Second World War.
But the Chancellor has already admitted that he wants to stop the vicious circle of ever-rising taxes. But how likely, really, is he to cut taxes?
Let's talk to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, who's already poised in Manchester, raring to go. Morning to you, Liam. Look, I mean, all the messages we've been getting from government so far have been, well, we won't put taxes up, but neither will we bring them down.
The UK tax burden really has spiralled, in the eyes of many, Stephen and Anne, out of control in recent years. There was a study by the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, that came out just a couple of days ago, and it really is pretty eye-watering, and it's certainly causing a lot of ructions in the Conservative Party, even before most of the party faithful have turned up here in Manchester for the annual party conference. The conference starts tomorrow, but people will start mustering today. But let's just have a look at what the row is about. I know it's early, but gird your loins, brace yourself, because here's a graphic. Have a look at this graph. This shows the UK tax burden. That's the total tax cake as a share of GDP. And you'll see there after the Second World War on the left of the screen, it plummeted. But in recent years, it's climbed all the way back up. And since Boris Johnson won his majority in 2019, the tax burden in the UK has risen from 33% of GDP all the way to 37%. And that is the highest since the Second World War. And this is the concern. An awful lot of Conservatives, they say, we don't want more tax rises. Even the Lib Dems at their party conference last weekend, they ruled out their famous policy of putting a penny on income tax to pay for public services, because they said, in a phrase guaranteed to wind up Tory activists, that under the Conservatives, taxes are already too high, even for the Lib Dems. So this is the atmosphere within the Conservative Party as Rishi Sunak tries to muster his troops, the activists, the envelope stuffers, for this vital party conference here in Manchester. Probably the last party conference the Tories will have before the next general election.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's going to play out in a very interesting manner because, as we said, it's more than 30 MPs are demanding tax cuts because they know that's what would get votes. But Jeremy Hunt seems very unlikely to do so. That's what the Institute of Fiscal Studies was saying yesterday. There's no way he's going to listen to that.
He hasn't got much fiscal wiggle room and much room for manoeuvre. You know, government borrowing in the 5 months to August was 40% higher than the same time last year. So the government really is pretty cash-strapped. I don't think Jeremy Hunt is going to unveil any tax cuts here at the party conference in Manchester. He may start making the case for tax cuts, and we're seeing that in the papers this morning. He's been interviewed in the Times saying, as you say, we've got to stop this vicious circle of tax rises. But I don't think he's actually going to deliver tax cuts today. Another reason he won't is because, as the saying goes, politics is showbiz for ugly people. And he's going to want to make the tax cut when he does it as dramatic as possible. And he's going to want it to be as near to the general election as possible. He's got an autumn statement in November, but he's also got a budget in the spring. And it's far more likely, in my view, that we'll see those Tory tax cuts with the party opening up, as they will see it, clear blue water between them and Labour. We're much more likely to see those in the spring, nearer a general election.
Just a quick word then on the other parties, Liam, because if there's no wiggle room for Jeremy Hunt to cut taxes, presumably there's no room for anybody else to pledge to cut taxes if they got into power.
I think that's right. I think all parties are mindful that even though there's a cost of living crisis, even though tax played a big role in the squeeze that both businesses and households have felt in recent months, you know, the Institute of Fiscal Studies calculates that by next year, the average household will be paying £3,500 more in tax per year when you take income tax, VAT, fuel duty and so on, than they were back in 2019. So there's a sense that the public wants lower taxes, but at the same time, all parties are mindful that if they're irresponsible with their tax pledges, if they're irresponsible with saying that they will spend more than the country can actually afford, then the public won't like that either. Look, this is really a balancing act, whether or not we can afford tax cuts before the next general election. When all things are considered, the Tories are more mindful to want tax cuts, not least because, as you say, 30 of their MPs now, including former Prime Minister Liz Truss, who will be here in Manchester making life difficult for Rishi Sunak, including former cabinet ministers like Jacob Rees-Mogg, former party chairman Brandon Lewis, former Minister Jake Berry, the Minister before he resigned. All of them have said publicly they will not vote for any more tax rises. So if Jeremy Hunt does try and introduce tax rises in his November statement or his in spring budget next year, those Conservatives will not vote for that bill, and the government may not be able to get its budget bill through Parliament, and that would almost be a vote of no confidence for Rishi Sunak.
OK, Liam, thanks very much.
Oh, yeah,
indeed.
Liam, I want to ask you how you got to Manchester. I mean, you must have gone up to Manchester yesterday from London, yeah?
I came up yesterday partly to beat the train strike, and partly because today I'm visiting the fabulous Manchester University with my son, Ned, who is thinking of coming here. So I'm here for one of those fabulous university open days at one of our great universities in Manchester. And my son doesn't know yet, but after the open day, we're off to Old Trafford to watch United play Palace.
Very good.
Ah, lovely.
At least you can guarantee he's not awake at this time of day. Lovely stuff, Liam. Thanks very much indeed. Well, transport to Manchester
is going to be a problem.
Well, it is.
Today.
Members of the Train Drivers Union ASLEF walking out again. There's a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions continues.
And these strikes are timed, of course, to hit the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, which sort of officially begins tomorrow. But people will want to be arriving from today. They're going to have to, they're going to have to drive or get helicopters or something, aren't they? Another strike, by the way, has been planned for next Wednesday.
Which is when they're all wanting to leave.
Yes.
Of course. Funny that, isn't it? Let's talk to travel guru Simon Calder. Good morning, Simon. There seems to be no end in sight for this.
Well, exactly as you say, and that's because there is no end in sight. It's extraordinary. I talked to Mick Whelan. He's the General Secretary of the ASLEF Train Drivers Union, and he accused the government of trying to destroy the railway. He said that they are in favour of rail and road, and, as Anne says, presumably helicopters, but they absolutely loathe the railways. The government says that's absolute nonsense. We spent £31 billion during the COVID pandemic paying for rail workers to make sure none of them left their jobs. There's an argument about how much passenger numbers have recovered, but going back to Liam's contribution, the railways, according to the government, are costing about £10 million a day, and the only way that they can get to balance the books, and it's still going to require a lot of public subsidy, is if the rail workers are prepared to accept that they will have to change their conditions, as well as accepting just a modest wage rise. The unions are demanding a no-strings pay rise, and, well, Mick Whelan told me they are expecting us to take a 20% pay cut at the same time as giving up all our terms and conditions, and we're not going to do that. Meanwhile, poor old passenger in the middle, and in large parts of England there will be no trains at all. On some operators there will be a kind of skeleton service, but today, also on Wednesday, and actually for pretty much the whole week due to an overtime ban, it's going to be misery for travellers once more.
Yes, and I presume that sort of trains end up in the wrong place as well with this mixture of an overtime ban and two strikes, you know, just a few days apart. I imagine trains end up in the wrong place, so there's going to be chaos, isn't there?
Well, there's going to be problems tomorrow morning on some operators, and indeed Tuesday night before the strike, Thursday morning after the strike, then trains may be out of position. To add to the misery, if you're in the southeast, particularly in London, there's then going to be a completely separate strike about jobs and safety on the London Underground. That's on Wednesday and Saturday. That's likely to, Wednesday and Friday, the 4th and the 6th of October. That's likely to wipe out pretty much the whole tube network, which will make things very difficult indeed. And meanwhile, today, if you are going to travel, then, well, you can get from London to York and to Newcastle and to Leeds. You can get, for instance, between Bristol, Bath, Swindon and London. But they are the exceptions. Transport for Wales, all good. ScotRail, all good. And the open access operators, companies like Lumo and Grab, Grand Central will be running normally. But otherwise, it's going to be a bleak old day once again. And this has been going on, Stephen and Anne, since June 2022. Absolutely the longest sequence of strikes that anybody can remember.
Yeah, it certainly is. Simon, good to see you as always.
Yeah.
Enjoy France.
And I'll have to get the helicopter out the garage.
You will.
Do.
What you got to do. It is 6:15. Let's remind you of our top story this morning. And Conservative MPs are demanding that taxes should be cut before the next election. How much of a storm will this cause ahead of the Tory party conference in Manchester?
And as Simon was explaining, there's more misery on the railways as members of ASLEF walk out on strike again today.
Sorry, Anne. And we're going to be talking to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, later this hour.
Do get in touch and tell us how the train strike today may be affecting what you were planning to do today. Love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, as a new school term begins, some students might be thinking about getting behind the wheel of a car.
The award-winning Road Safe Roadshow is now touring schools in Northern Ireland, designed to make young drivers think twice before driving and then showing them the consequences of making bad decisions as a driver.
Well, Dougie Beattie went to Sperrin College for a closer look at the show.
The knock on the door that is every parent's nightmare. This reenactment is part of an award-winning show that brings together members of the emergency services who share their experiences of fatal road crashes with those that have now reached the age to drive. Johnny Amos is a paramedic that has been part of this show for more than 12 years.
Fortunately, the kids that come to see these shows aren't aware of the aftermath and consequences of being involved in a road traffic collision. Carnage, blood, twisted metal. It's just horrific. It's just horrific to see, and it's real life events in my life that I try to forget. But again, we like to reinforce and try and come here and build that picture to give these kids a sense of reality of what it's actually like to be involved in these road traffic collisions.
This multi-agency approach is headed up by the police. Chief Inspector Graham Dodds fears this year's figures of road deaths could get much higher.
So today is about signposting in a very, very clear and almost shocking manner the dangers of using the roads, the responsibilities drivers and passengers have, and that very simple fact that, this year alone in Northern Ireland, 48 people have been killed, and, it's only the end of September. As the head of road policing, I'm assessing and worried that by the end of December this year, we could have 70 or 80 people dead.
Rory Domigan is a firefighter that believes it's not just the driver that needs to be aware of distractions.
Every action on the road has a consequence, and we're looking for the young people to understand that, getting a driving licence has responsibilities, that they need to make the right decisions, because if they don't make the right decisions, they can affect not just their own lives and their families' lives, but other road users. It also goes for not just drivers, but pedestrians and for passengers in the car. Distraction driving, if the passenger wants to show a message on a phone, wait till they pull the car in, because they could be responsible for killing or maiming somebody.
The contributors are all real, and the reenactments are based on actual events. But does it have the impact on the students?
I personally just passed my theory test yesterday, and I wasn't thinking too much about driving and everything, so I think the show is very eye-opening. It really puts into respect that this can happen to anyone, and anyone could be involved in a car accident, and it's a very traumatizing thing to witness, and certainly some of the scenes today were definitely disturbing to witness, but it's something that I believe everyone should have in the back of their mind, that it can happen to anyone.
It was really good, definitely makes you aware of the risks and all. Very informative.
It was quite shocking at times, but that's really what we needed to see. It's the harsh reality of driving on the road, especially people like myself that are, young drivers, and you need to see that we can be dangerous on the road if we're not careful.
Dougie Beattie, GB News, Macrofeld.
Wow, that is...
I mean, that's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah. My view would be that youngsters don't take any notice of things like that, but maybe clearly they do, because it's a very successful scheme.
I mean, it's a bit grim and it's a bit gruesome,
grim.
but you sort of need to see the reality of it when things go horribly wrong. So I don't know. I'm a bit slightly torn over it, but I probably think it's a good thing. Scare the pants off them a little bit.
Well, would me, yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, let us know what you think this morning. Let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Here's Aidan.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland, lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon with just a few showers for northwest Scotland and a fresh breeze here. Still some warmth, though, in the southeast.
Lovely stuff.
Would you know what to do if you came across an enormous snake called a royal python just in your village or something?
No.
Well, apparently they're not venomous, but they are big and pretty frightening. And 2 pythons have been found within days of each other in the same small village.
Oh.
They must have gotten out of somewhere or been released. I know some people in the end find snakes too difficult to keep.
Just let them go.
And then just let them go. But how frightening is that?
Wouldn't fancy that. Which village do we need to avoid?
It's West Ashling in West Sussex.
All right, don't go there, ladies.
No, they found 2 within days of each other. They think there's a third loose because it was spotted, but by the time the RSPCA came out to get it, it had disappeared again.
Oh, right. Yeah, don't fancy that.
No.
But we do fancy having a bit of sport for you very shortly with Aidan McGee.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, there's a bit of hoo-ha this morning.
About boring communities.
Oh, yeah, go on. Les.
Yes, Les in Newcastle. Morning, Les says, your discussion this morning about the most boring areas in the Sun newspaper has left me shocked. Tyne Weir was 4th. Nobody ever calls Geordies boring, so they must have just met a lot of people from Sunderland.
Oh, harsh, Les. Karen says, I live in a small village called Reepham in Lincolnshire, 5 miles from Lincoln. I wouldn't live anywhere else. I've lived all over with my late father being in the forces, but this is home.
You see, in Lincolnshire was the top most boring place, wasn't it?
But I tell you what, there's nothing wrong with boring.
Well, no.
Because London is definitely not boring, and I wouldn't want to live here.
No?
So, you know, it's chaotic.
Well, you wouldn't want to live in West Ashling at the moment, I don't think.
No, that's where the snakes
That's
are
where
on
the
loose.
pythons seem to be coming out of the bushes.
Oh, they are. At 6:25, let's have a look at some of the other stories this morning. The teenage girl who died after a school coach crashed on the M53 has been named by police as Jessica Baker. The driver of the bus also died. Police have confirmed 58 people were involved. 4 children were taken to hospital. A 14-year-old boy has life-changing injuries.
The Prime Minister said he's slamming the brakes on harebrained schemes such as blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limits and low-traffic neighbourhoods. Speaking to The Sun, Rishi Sunak vowed to focus on policies that stem the relentless attack on motorists. More details are expected to be set out in Transport Secretary Mark Harper's speech to Conservative members on Monday. We're going to be talking to him a bit later on.
Torrential downpours after a week of mostly steady rainfall brought flash flooding to New York City yesterday. Subway services disrupted, ground-level apartments inundated, and as you can see, some streets turning into rivers. Almost 8 inches of rain fell. The New York governor warned of life-threatening floods and declared a state of emergency for the city, Long Island and the Hudson Valley, and National Guard troops were deployed to assist.
Is the weather getting more dramatic, or is it just that we're reporting it more?
I think probably the latter.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
It just seems like, you know, every day there's something major happening with the weather.
Yeah. Aidan's here.
Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
To see you.
Anything dramatic in the Ryder Cup?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, we've got to give context here because 2 years ago we sat on this very bench here talking about Europe's capitulation in Whistling Straits against the US side. It was a real whitewash. It was just a listless performance. And yeah, look, there have been changes made, but yesterday we saw a breakneck start for Europe. They were 4-0 up after the first session. They have a lead now of 6.5 to 1.5 points. As I say, 4-0 up, but a stunning opening day display yesterday, spearheaded by the form of Jon Rahm, Justin Rose and Rory McIlroy, 3 names very familiar with us. Jon Rahm has been described as this kind of guy who would take on a bull barehanded, but he's also got very soft paws, and he's somebody who's very adept on the short game as well. An outstanding performance hit for him yesterday, and real signs as well of US meltdown. These are caliber players with lots of major winning experience, but Zach Johnson, who's the captain, just said he was very proud of his players. I mean, this is the worst day that America have experienced in Ryder Cup history on an opening day, and yet he comes out and says, a little bit like Comical Ali, isn't it? He said everything's going really well. And then later on we had Brooks Koepka, another celebrated member of the US side, talking about Jon Rahm's behaviour, his antics as being childlike and not becoming a player of his standing on the tour. So, I mean, it's just a little bit sort of sour grapes there. And then this morning we're, of course, underway at 6:35 a.m, so we'll be able to give you updates later on. My brother's actually there as a fan. I was talking to him yesterday, over in Rome, and he said to me that the reason Europe have started so well is because there are kind of amphitheatres all over the course. It's like a bear pit. It favours the home players. If you're a home player and you've got that kind of raucous attention on you, you can thrive off that. If you're an opposing player, if you come from America and the crowd are a little bit hostile, that's where the waters get a bit treacherous.
Sure, that's an excuse, isn't it?
Well, no, I mean, to be fair, the US aren't using that as an excuse. That's just the observation of a lot of people who are over there. That, you know, it would work the same. If you consider 2 years ago at Whistling Straits, there were no crowd. There were no... Historically, Europe's Ryder Cup players have fed off the crowd. And when there was no one there, it just came down to the machinations of the game. and they were beaten quite fairly and squarely.
I bet you the atmosphere's really good at the moment.
Yeah,
Brother
exactly.
must be really enjoying it.
He's got a long day ahead of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, is this the same brother who charged you to go to a barbecue?
No, they're 51 weeks apart. There's not much difference between them.
Oh, right, OK. Lovely stuff, Aidan. Thank you very much indeed. See you a little bit later on.
Right now it is, she said, coughing just while the clock ticks to... It's exactly 6:30. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and me. A reminder of our top stories right now.
Conservative MPs are demanding that taxes should stop rising before the next election. How much of a storm, if any, actually, will this cause ahead of the Tory party conference in Manchester?
And that's if they get to Manchester, because there's more misery on the railways as members of ASLEF walk out today on strike again.
And coming up, etiquette experts say society is adopting new rules for making phone calls, like text before you call and avoiding speakerphones in public.
Oh, yes, very much so. We'll be debating that. So rude, isn't it, when you put somebody on speakerphone and everybody else can hear your conversation?
Yes.
Maybe they don't want to.
Anyway, let us know what you think about that one.
Still to come, a new poll shows there's a path to election victory. There is for Rishi Sunak. We'll have headline makers next with Ella Whelan and Candice Holsworth. You're watching GB.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
6:33, good morning. Let's have a look at the front pages of the newspapers this morning. The Mail says voters are backing Rwanda and net zero plans. The poll shows Rishi Sunak has a path to election victory, apparently.
The Daily Mirror has reported on the tragic death of a 15-year-old girl. She was killed in a school bus crash on the M53 in Merseyside yesterday morning. That's the Times that we're looking at, actually, there.
It is. The Times says the Chancellor has pledged to end the vicious circle of ever-rising taxes.
And the front page of the... there it is. Features Rishi Sunak's plan to block councils from issuing zealous fines and prevent blanket use of 20-mile-an-hour zones.
Let's talk through some of the headlines today, then, with journalist and author Ella Whelan and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth, our headline makers this morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Let's start with... Ella, actually, it's you, isn't it, and the Mail and the election plans for Rishi.
Yes.
They're going to have to be pretty good if he's going to beat the polls.
Well, this is interesting because the Mail's making a big splash with their own poll, looking at various questions from small boats to taxes to HS2 and all the rest of the stuff that's happening. It's a small poll, it's only 1,000 people taking a snapshot between the 28th and 29th of September. And the Mail is running with the fact that there are a few no-brainers in here. So, 60% of people support the idea of the Illegal Migration Act. That won't come as a surprise to many people. They want him to, 42% want to get the northern leg of HS2 done. Again, not really particularly controversial. Most people want to see a plan that is begun by the government finished and implemented. But there is some stuff in here that Rishi Sunak won't like. So, for example, 48%, as opposed to 31%, think that he's not doing well as the leader of the Conservative Party. In fact, 39%, as opposed to 31%, think that Keir Starmer would make a better Prime Minister. So it's quite an interesting snapshot of how things are still very complicated for this government, and that actually going into party conference time, nothing is certain. Things are still, despite a few kind of announcements around today, stuff to do with cars, people still want to see some kind of substantial movement on Sunak's 5 pledges. And he certainly isn't going to just be able to come in, announce a few nice, things around net zero and waltz into another round of government. It's going to be much more complicated for him.
Yeah, I got the same impression. It was quite a mixed picture. I mean, his position on green policies seems to be very popular, but he's interestingly not that trusted on the NHS. Voters seem to think Keir Starmer is more capable, or the people who responded to this poll, should I say, think Keir Starmer is more capable of managing what's gone wrong. And they don't think he can solve the small boats crisis as well. They don't think Rishi Sunak will be able to do that. So in terms of his 5 pledges, it's a really, really mixed picture. And he's actually got quite a tricky path to election victory. I mean, there's no way that it's a should, even though they've seen this bump in the polls since he's taken the stance he has on net zero. So maybe this is sort of showing to them, it's like the evidence is showing them where they need to focus and exactly how they need to differentiate themselves from Labour.
How bumpy a ride is it going to be at conference, do we think?
Well, I mean, splits within his own party are severe. I mean, he has to kind of do he's fighting on 2 fronts. On the one hand, trying to solve things like, there's a big row around the European Convention of Human Rights. There's, big rows around things around HS2, Brexit rows remain. But there's people like Liz Truss who aren't going to give him too much of an easy ride at conference. His own party is certainly not sort of ready to fight an election in a unified way. And then there's also the fact that...
Plus, you've got a whole load of people after his job, and people like Penny Mordaunt desperate for number 10 and...
Well, exactly. It's not like... I mean, Penny Mordaunt being just one of them, there isn't this unification. But also, in terms of appealing to the electorate, the Conservatives have this problem. Labour, sort of in a similar way, but the Conservatives have this problem where, for example, they might make announcements on inheritance tax, which they think will be a winner for their voters. And sort of traditionally, you think, well, yes, Tory voters don't like changes to inheritance tax. But remember that in 2019, the sweep of Conservative voters was much wider. It went into working class communities and the Red Wall and all of that. So it's not as simple as just saying, let's be NIMBY and let's protect inheritance tax and we'll win. There's a much more complicated voter base there for them.
Although they are trying to reach out to drivers, and I suppose that's a very big base. The Mark Harper, who we're going to speak to, I think, quite soon, had done a huge piece there in the Express, saying, we are now the party of the driver. We're going to protect drivers' rights in all sorts of different ways. We're not going to have blanket 20-mile-an-hour zones and things like that.
Well, you can't stop it in London, can he? You can't stop it, low-traffic neighbourhoods and all that sort of thing.
You can't go faster than 20 anywhere in London anyway, can you, really?
No,
but it's just interesting that they are trying to reach out to at least that's a very wide voter base.
Yes. I mean, the announcement, one of the major announcements that we're going to have a parking app that applies to the whole rest of the country. Fine, that's lovely. I hate the fact that I've got 7 on my phone. Really the issue. The issue is LTNs. The issue is, speed limits and things like that. So, again, it's just, get it right.
Well, and as you said before, Candice, the 5 big pledges which aren't being met, in the Telegraph this morning, the Home Secretary refusing to talk with Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, about immigration, which seems... He may not say anything. It may not be a conversation which produces anything, but it doesn't look good to say, no, we're not talking to you.
I know. And so this article, actually, in The Telegraph was very interesting about Suella Braverman, because I think the people who'd briefed the article, quite critical of her. And apparently Welby wanting to have a meeting with her about everything she's been saying and her pushing him back, they were very surprised by it. They actually thought she would take the meeting. But there are many in the Conservative Party who aren't happy with the way she's been talking about this and the way she's been talking about the ECHR as well. They think that she's taking too hardline a stance and they don't want her to do that. And also what she's been saying about multiculturalism, Rishi Sunak came out and said the exact opposite. So there's divides there, and I do wonder how much of this has to do with a possible leadership election at some point if they don't win the next election.
Do you think anyone, though, really cares whether or not she meets Justin Welby? I mean, really, do we? We might have 30, 40 years ago, we might have thought that an archbishop has a right to express his opinions, and particularly to her. But do we actually think that anymore?
It's a good question, because you would think that Anglican churchgoers would be the Conservative Party's natural constituency. But I think Justin Welby, I don't know how in sync he is with Conservative voters on this issue.
No, he probably isn't.
No, he probably
Yes.
isn't.
However, see, that would be the whole point for me. You know, he doesn't agree with a lot of what is going on. However, that doesn't mean you should listen to opposing voices.
Yeah, I mean,
GB News is all about you listen to opposing voices, even if you come out and say, thanks for your time, but we're not going to implement anything you've suggested.
Yeah, she could. I mean, the whole point is that obviously, if Braverman did go into a meeting with him, she couldn't stay quiet while he did his spiel, which he would do, which would be equivalent to what he's done before, which is you're basically evil if you want to talk about anything in relation to migration. I find myself in a strange position of being, completely opposed in terms of how liberal we are on migration to Suella Braverman's position, but wanting to back her on all these sort of, the idea of an elected politician, even with the influence that the church has in this country and the history of it, having to basically bow and scrape to, and Justin Welby has positioned himself as sort of not just the moral voice of the church, but someone who can sort of throw his weight around on issues, and has previously, I know that sounds strange saying because he's the Archbishop, but the way he's waded into political rows of late has, I think, left a bad taste in people's mouth, even churchgoers, because it's just too much and it's just too far. And so, in relation to debates about the ECHR, which are fundamentally about democracy and how governments can make and enact laws, I think probably a lot of people will say, well, good that she hasn't met him, whether or not that's the right tack or not.
I don't know. I don't think Archbishop and someone who is the leader of the Church of England should necessarily keep their mouth shut. I'm not saying we have to agree with what they're saying, but they have a moral duty to voice concerns.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a right to meet the Home Secretary, does he?
No, but also, what Suella Braverman said on multiculturalism, whatever you think about it, Angela Merkel said it previously, David Cameron said it previously. It's actually old hat, her argument.
Yeah.
Did Welby or any other Archbishop come out and have such moral outrage or when they said it back then? No. There's something else going on in relation to Suella Braverman, which, again, not a fan of her, but I think you don't have to be a fan of her to realise that there is some kind of faux kind of moral crusade going on here, which is about stopping immigration policy.
I just wonder if Welby's picked up as well amongst some Conservatives their dissatisfaction with Suella Braverman. They don't like her. There are many within the Conservative Party who just don't like her and don't like the way she talks about it. I think she is slightly weak in that regard.
I don't think he would be playing politics in that sense. He's just wanting to voice concerns. And I don't know whether he has a right or not. I don't know. But then don't forget the king is the sort of head of the church and Justin Welby is the leader. It is the king's government. I don't know whether there is some link there to say they should speak to him or listen to him if he wants to say something.
I personally think it's outrageous that he thinks he's got the right.
Do you?
Yeah, it's a religious leader. That's what he is now. And we live in the 21st century.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I disagree with you. But then I'm a churchgoer.
Yeah.
So then maybe
I have been, but not for that reason. I don't see that he has a right to meddle in politics.
I think I don't meddle. I think it's about having your say. I think it's about having your say. I'm not saying she should listen. She should agree with him or kowtow to him.
I think maybe the difference is that Welby knows. I'm climbing inside his head now, which is probably unfair, but I think that Welby knows that whatever he said would make all of the front pages, would have so much backing, even from people who weren't churchgoers, and it would add weight to this sort of argument that's been mounted against Braverman, which is basically, you know, and GB News will know about this because you've, you know, have dealt in similar debates, talk about immigration, even, you know, to any extent, shut up, you're a racist. And there is that tone to it, which I think will make a lot of people think, talking to Welby, will that really benefit the debate?
We are horrible to our Home Secretaries, aren't we?
Oh, but
Yeah.
I mean, they have a horrible job.
They do.
Sometimes they're quite bad at it.
So many women have done it as well.
I don't necessarily want... I mean, sometimes they tend to be quite bad at it. You know, the role of Home Secretary hasn't been a successful one over the last... For quite a long time. So it's not to let them off the hook, but there is something else that goes on in relation to the way in which, you know, we've seen the way in which Suella Braverman's been discussed in relation to this multiculturalism argument, basically saying, how dare she, as a brown woman, have a view on this that's not in line with, you know, identity politics. That's outrageous, you know. Play the politics, not the person.
Out of interest, who was our last male Home Secretary?
No.
Long time ago.
It's a long time ago. But David Davis was Home Secretary, wasn't he?
Gosh,
I can't
was he?
remember.
Don't
I
think
don't know.
so.
He might have, but anyway, we'll find out. We shall have a
Let us
Google.
know.
It is 6:45. Let's remind you of the top story this morning. And Conservative MPs are demanding that taxes should stop rising before the next election. But will that be enough for voters ahead of the general election? And of course, it's Conservative Party conference in Manchester this weekend as well.
If MPs can get there, because there's more misery on the railways as members of ASLEF walk out today on strike.
And imminently, we're going to be talking to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper. I'm just having a list of,
Me too.
of Home Secretaries. I mean, David Blunkett was Home Secretary, but obviously that's a long time.
That's a long time ago.
And Jack Straw, when was he Home Secretary?
Who are they?
Jack Straw, yeah. It was...
That was even longer ago.
Oh, Lord, we're going back hundreds of years here on the delightful...
Yeah, who was before Theresa May? Gee, it's not even that long ago. And I can't remember.
Isn't it funny how we forget? And they play such an important role.
Hugely, and a hugely difficult
But it's
job.
almost too big a... So here...
Oh, it was Amber Rudd.
Grant Shapps.
I totally forgot Amber Rudd was Home Secretary. It wasn't for very long.
So the last Home Secretary was Grant Shapps. But yeah,
I mean,
but that was only for 6 days.
Yeah, you're to be forgiven because obviously the Conservative Party's been playing musical chairs for however many years. So
Sajid Javid was 2018, 2019. And then it was the last male before that was Alan Johnson for Labour, 2009.
Gee, there's been a lot, actually.
Well, obviously, the people we remember because of the time at which it was, you know, Theresa May, Windrush, and there was that kind of thing. Priti Patel, obviously, and now Braverman. There has been, you know, the flashpoints of when immigration has become a huge issue have tended to
and
be
still
female.
is. My goodness, it is.
Yeah. Should we have a look at Katie Piper in the Mirror? Because she's concerned about the... I mean, she obviously famously victim of an acid attack and really turned things round, but she's worried about this person getting out of prison.
Yeah, pretty horrible story. I mean, so the individual, Daniel Lynch, who was a former partner of Katie Piper, turned incredibly nasty and, in effect, organised a acid attack against her. The person who actually threw the acid and committed the assault was released a while ago. But Daniel Lynch is now up for parole, having, you know, he was given a life sentence. And Piper is in the papers talking about the fact that she still doesn't know whether he poses a threat to her. Obviously, her experience is horrendous. She had to have 400 operations after the attack, you know, severely injured. I mean, you know, like you said, turned it around now, you know, was a beautiful woman before, is a beautiful woman now, and has made a, you know, has made a real success of her life and hasn't let it hold her back. But, you know, that's the question that parole boards face. I mean, we do believe in the idea of rehabilitation, even for people who have committed really heinous crimes in the past. The question is whether or not they've changed. So that will be for the
he
parole
will be
board.
on a life licence. If it's a life sentence, he'll be on a life licence, which you would presume would be some sort of exclusion around Katie Piper. He's not going to go anywhere near her.
No. And I mean, you know, he's now been...
How long's he served?
13 years. 13. So he's been in since 2009 and...
Crumbs, that's not long enough. It really isn't.
Well, no, we can have debates about how long, you know, how long these things should be. But the thing that I get nervous about is that obviously Katie Piper has her personal position and you can understand that. But there is, you know, we do believe in rehabilitation. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't believe in throwing away the key. So we have to keep that into consideration in these cases.
OK, right. Well, on that note, listen to this, because we want your views on this afterwards if there's time. The Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, is joining us this morning. It's very good to see you today. Can we talk first and foremost about the PM says he's ending the war on motorists? Really?
Yes, look, I think there's been a sense that there's lots of things that keep coming out, you see from local councils, that motorists feel that they're being attacked. We should remember, most people in this country drive. Most people use the car to get to work, to get around, to get to appointments. And we want to make it easier for them to do so, easier for them to get to their appointments, and just make life easier for drivers. After all, this is the overwhelming majority of the population.
Big interview there. They've splashed it hugely in the Daily Express today, saying we are now the party of the motorist. So you're reaching out to a huge demographic there. Is that a sort of election bid?
Well, look, I think it's very sensible to just remember that, you know, particularly outside, you know, London, most people in the country use their cars every day. They use them for getting to work, getting the kids to school, getting around to essential appointments. And we want to make life easier for them. So that's why we're setting out some sensible measures, I think, which will help drivers. For example, making it possible for councils to do sensible things, but not to have foolish policies like a 20-mile-an-hour blanket speed limit that we've seen in Wales, which we can see is very unpopular, has very little benefit. And we want to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen in England.
Well, you might be the party for motorists coming up to the next election. You're not the party for people who use the trains, are you? I mean, another strike underway. I mean, this has been going on for more than a year now. HS2... Well, who knows what's happening with that main leg from Birmingham to Manchester? Is that going to be scrapped? I mean, it's absolute chaos, isn't it?
Well, look, let me just pick up your point about strikes. I mean, first of all, it's worth just saying that the vast majority of people, most journeys in this country are done by road, not by trains. But let me pick up the point about strikes. We've got a fair and reasonable pay offer on the table. There was one accepted on Network Rail. That dispute was resolved. But the dispute at the moment, the strike that's taking place today, it's clearly a political strike, timed to coincide with the Conservative Party conference. You don't have to think very carefully to see that's the case. But look, there's a fair offer on the table. Train drivers get paid an average salary of £60,000 for a 4-day, 35-hour week. The pay rise that's on the table that they won't put to their members would take that average salary to £65,000 a year. Now, look, I think most of your viewers will look at that and think that is actually quite fair and reasonable. It's effectively being funded from the taxpayer, because the rail industry at the moment, post-COVID, is financially not sustainable. So we've got to deliver a fair and reasonable pay rise with essential reforms, and that's what's on the table, and that's what I hope ASLEF will put to their members, you know, rather than carrying out what is effectively a political strike this weekend.
It certainly is political. I mean, how are you going to get up to Manchester today?
Well, look, I'm clearly not going to be going on the train. I'll be driving up there, which is how most people will be getting to the conference. But look, it's not helpful that they're going on strike. It drives people away from the railways and damages their own long-term interests. And as I said, there's a fair and reasonable pay offer on the table, and I would urge them to put it to their members and allow their members to make a decision. You know, Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of that union, won't put that offer to their members. He sits on the Labour Party's national executive, and timing the strike for the Conservative conference can be seen for what it is. It's a political strike, and I think he should put the reasonable offer on the table to his members.
You're hardly going to get a warm reception, though, from the good people of Manchester, are you, when it looks like you are scrapping their leg of the HS2? I mean, so much for levelling up, so much for the Northern powerhouse. I mean, it's all falling apart.
Well, look, I'd say a couple of things. First of all, we're getting on with building HS2. There are spades in the ground, and we are getting on with it. That's the first point I'd say. And secondly, when you go out and about in the country, most people ask you about the connections between their cities, between their towns, and about how you get about on a day-to-day basis. The number one thing that people talk to me about is the state of the, the quality of our roads, the money we put into local transport.
Forgive me for jumping in, but are you? Is HS2? You say you're getting on with building it. Is it going to go any further north than Birmingham?
Look, we're getting on with building it. I'm not going to comment on the various bits of speculation that have been in the newspapers. That's what it is. It's speculation. You wouldn't expect me to comment on it.
Well, we
People
would.
can see that we're getting on with delivering the project at pace.
Yeah, but
Sorry?
But the whole point of the project was to connect parts of the north, which isn't now happening, but also connect the north and the south. It looks like it's going to go from somewhere outside of London to Birmingham. So yeah, we would expect you to comment on that.
Well, look, at the moment, that's just speculation. We're getting on with delivering it. And as I said, what I'm here today is focusing on our plan for drivers, which is how most people in the country get around and carry out their lives. And I think that's what most people will think is the priority for the government.
So are you saying then you're going to abandon HS2 in favour of motorists and roads?
No, I'm saying that I'm not going to comment on speculation, and I'm here focusing on our plan for drivers, which is about making sure that people can get about more easily. Well, no, the speculation is from the media. When the government has something to say, if it has something to say, it will say it in the usual way. I'm here focusing on our plan for drivers, the steps that we're setting out to make it easier for the vast majority of people who drive every day to get about, to make it easier for them to park, and to make their lives easier, which is what the government is about.
Mark Harper, good to see you this morning. Thank you. Let us know what you think about
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
gbviews@gbnews.com. Let's get a check on the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland, lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon with just a few showers for northwest Scotland and a fresh breeze here. Still some warmth, though, in the southeast.
Let us know what you think of what Mark Harper was not saying there.
I mean, the fact he wouldn't say HS2 was going to go to Manchester implies that it isn't.
And at the moment, it's starting in the middle of nowhere and it's sort of ending in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
What a good that's going to be. Do let us know what you think.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 30th of September. Today, Conservative MPs demand that taxes must stop rising before the next election. But is that going to cause a storm ahead of the Tory party conference in Manchester?
And there's more misery on the railways today as members of ASLEF walk out on strike again. Earlier we spoke to Transport Secretary Mark Harper, and he insists that the latest pay offer is more than fair and should be put to union members.
Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of that union, won't put that offer to the members. He sits on the Labour Party's national executive, and timing the strike for the Conservative conference can be seen for what it is. It's a political strike, and I think he should put the reasonable offer on the table to his members.
Rather bizarrely, etiquette experts say society is adopting new rules for making phone calls, like text before you call and avoiding speakerphones in public. We're going to be debating that this hour. Text before you call.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good idea. I'm just about to call you, and then you can sort of ignore it. Let's find out what the weather's doing. Here's Aidan.
It's a bright start for most of us this weekend, but not everyone will see that weather lasting. Find out when and where the rain turns up later today in the full forecast.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and you're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Should the Home Secretary meet the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Ooh, that's got you going.
It has. Anthony says Suella Braverman should not meet with Mr Welby. He should have nothing to do with politics.
And Hanson says the Home Secretary should meet the Archbishop. I'm a Catholic and I have much more conservative views.
You see, Jeff says if Justin Welby wants to make political comment, he should stand for election to Parliament like anybody else. But well, don't forget, he's in the Lords.
He is in the Lords.
So he has got a link to politics already.
Historically, somebody in his job, as it were, has a right to express his views. It's whether or not he has a right to meet the Home Secretary and whether or not she's being more than impolite to not meet him.
I think she is being impolite. I think you should listen to what he has to say, even if you don't agree with it.
There must be a reason she's not, though. She probably feels, like a lot of our viewers do, and listeners, morning, saying that, you know, he doesn't have the right. He should stay away and look after the church.
Well, I don't know if I would doubt she's thinking that. And I would say she just doesn't want to hear some strongly opposing views. Which, again, I can understand because it's human nature, but I think it benefits us all to hear views that we don't agree with, even if you don't. I'm not saying she should change her mind, change her policies, change her approach, but I'd still think you should listen to views that you don't agree with.
Not if you're a politician, you're a Secretary of State, and you feel that the Church doesn't have a right to come in and express their views. Why should she listen to him?
Yeah, but it's about the views, isn't it? It's about hearing someone in authority, which she does have, saying something that she doesn't agree with. Isn't that what we're all about on GB News? Hearing the idea of free speech is that you hear things. And
but he's got his right to free speech. He could give an interview to the newspaper. He does all the time, doesn't he? He doesn't have to see her. I don't know. There's something about it that irritates me, and I don't really know why.
No, I think she should see him. I don't think she should necessarily change her mind because of meeting.
No.
But I think she should hear what he has to say.
No, I don't think she should. I don't think she should feel that she has to. On the issue of phones, I find it fascinating, phone etiquette, because how much have mobile phones and everything changed our lives? Nowadays, you take it everywhere with you, which means that people can harass you all the time. And whenever you see a call coming up or a text, you feel you've got to sort of engage with it. And you also feel as though you're being very rude if you don't. It's interesting, Yvonne's already been in touch. Morning, Yvonne. Says, I'm a bit deaf and I can only make a call from my phone using the speaker. However, I do refrain from making those calls in public.
Yeah, well, I think, frankly, you should if it's on speakerphone.
I find it interesting that the idea is that you should text before you then call.
I think that's ridiculous. If you don't want to answer the call, don't answer it.
If you read a text, the person, though, knows that you've read the text.
On WhatsApp?
Oh, not on ordinary texts?
Depends on the phone you've got.
Because I worry about that then you can't pretend that you never got the call.
It depends what sort of phone you've got as to whether on an ordinary text message, whether it'll say it's been read or not.
I think the idea of texting before calling is quite a good one.
Why? I'm going to call you now.
And say, no, have you got a moment to talk?
Well, if you wait for a response...
Yeah.
I'll just ring. Anyway, let us know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.com.
You leave voice messages, don't you?
I do voice notes.
He does lovely rambling messages. They're lovely.
I quite like those, you see.
Yeah, I like those. They're very friendly.
Anyway, let's talk politics. It's the day before Conservative Party conference, and even before the famous faces arrive in Manchester, it's already making headlines this morning.
As you can imagine, all eyes are on the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, after more than 30 Tory MPs have signed a pledge to their constituents saying they're never again going to vote for an increase in taxes.
Those who signed include our colleague, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, and former Cabinet Minister Sir Jake Berry, who we're going to be talking to during the programme.
Yeah, and all of this pressure comes as the Institute for Fiscal Studies has found that this government will have overseen the largest set of tax rises since the Second World War. Look at that graph go.
Well, the Chancellor has already said he wants to stop the vicious circle of ever-rising taxes. So, isn't he just agreeing with what these people are telling him? Anyway, I don't know if this is turning into a storm in a teacup. Charlie Rowley will know. He's former advisor to Michael Gove. Morning to you.
Morning, hi.
So these people say they're never again going to vote for a tax rise, and Jeremy Hunt's saying, I don't want to do any more tax rises. So what's the point?
Well, it's a great question because as a Conservative, instinctively you want to see taxes come down. You don't want to see tax hikes. But it is the case, as the IFS pointed out and as other people have said, that, we have got the largest tax burden in the country, and that's because of the interventions that took place during COVID. That was one great big intervention, the biggest since the Second World War, to fund the people's lives and livelihoods, to protect the NHS. As I say, the biggest intervention since the Second World War, because we were fighting an invisible enemy against COVID. So it was a huge intervention that needed to take place. The second one following that was obviously the protection of people's energy bills. Because of the war in Ukraine, prices were going through the roof because of the importing of gas from oil and gas from Russia. So two big interventions that have had to take place in a short succession of time means that the Chancellor has got to be absolutely, I think, rigid and have a laser-like focus on making sure that you can grow the economy, that inflation comes down to help people, because that's ultimately the biggest tax hike on anybody with prices going up.
It's not a tax, so we've got to be careful.
But it feels like, because prices are going up, so it feels. But you're absolutely right. So we've got to make sure that inflation comes down. Interest rates have been frozen now for the next quarter. So seeing interest rates come down to help people with borrowing and mortgages, that should be the next step. So when that starts to happen, and as we see the economy growing, as it has done in the last couple of months, then you can start to say, look, we're doing a good job. We're sticking to the plan. We're getting the economy back on track, and now we can start to look at tax cuts.
I wonder, when he makes his big speech, whether he will hint at all, in order to keep these Tory MPs, the 30-odd who've signed this pledge, whether to keep them happy, whether he'll hint that before the election he might well cut taxes?
I think that's right. I mean, everybody will be listening with their ear to the ground, to making sure to see if there's any kind of hint or showing a bit of leg, in that direction. But I think what the Chancellor will want to do is to make sure that when the election comes, that he's going to the country and the Prime Minister is going to the country to be absolutely straight with the public. So whether it's about things like net zero, making sure that actually, yes, there's a commitment to net zero by 2050, but we're shifting some of the destination points along the way to 2030 to 2035 to get rid of your diesel and petrol car, just to help people with the cost of living. I think what he would want to do is to make sure he goes to the country, the Chancellor, to say, OK, we've either now stuck to the path that we've set out, that we've been able to grow the economy, we can now have tax cuts, or to be straight with the public and say, we're still in a very difficult position, but don't wreck the progress that we're making. Stick with the Conservatives because we can do tax cuts maybe in a year or so's time. But if you hand the economy over to Labour, then it will just be more tax and spend and borrowing, and prices will be even higher for people.
You see, I want to sit down with Rees-Mogg. I don't know if we can get him on. Probably not. It's probably busy today, but it'd be interesting because I wonder what is the point of these, and they're almost positioning themselves as rebels. This 30. We are talking to one of them a little bit later on, Jake Berry. But the idea of saying we're demanding, we're telling our constituents, we're signing a pledge to say we will never again in this Parliament vote for a tax rise. Well, if the taxes went up in this Parliament, it's the Tory government signing its death warrant, isn't it? So it isn't going to happen.
Well, I think I would be very surprised if we were to see any more tax increases, because it's all...
It's like me signing a pledge to say I'm determined to stay on air for the next 60 seconds, come what may. It's not going to... Of course it's going to happen.
Well, I would sign that pledge. I'd back that all the way. more than 60 seconds, I would encourage. But you're absolutely right. Look, when you're getting towards an election, obviously Conservative activists, Conservative supporters will want to see tax cuts. That's what people want. That's what Tory MPs will want. And I think this is a way to sort of campaign in advance of what we all hope to see, which are tax cuts. But obviously the Chancellor has to be in the position to do that. And, you can only have tax cuts when you've got the economy on a strong and stable footing.
There's a lot of speculation about Rishi Sunak and how popular he may well be. There's no danger to his premiership, though, now, is there? I mean, they're not going to try and find another leader.
No. I would be
don't think so.
very surprised if there were to be any kind of change. I'd be mortified, actually, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, but you know that the vultures are circling, and no doubt you'll know who's behind it, who's trying to garner support at the minute in the corridors of power.
Well, every Tory leader that I know since David Cameron knew when he first came in to sort of modernise the Conservative Party, even he had his critics when obviously we were winning elections, and so everybody has their critics. So, but I think it'll be a buoyant conference. I think it could be the last one before a general election, so everybody will want to be as optimistic and enjoy the occasion as much as they can, because it could be the last time that we'll get together before everybody's asked to go out and knock on doors and deliver those leaflets. And hopefully, with the polls narrowing, as I think was front page of the Daily Mail and you were talking about earlier on, there is a path to victory for the Conservative Party, and that's exactly what the Conservative Party and the Prime Minister will want to focus on this weekend.
As long as they don't want to use that path to victory and get there on the HS2...
Yes, they'll never get there.
All right. Just briefly, Mark Harper was on a minute ago. It's all just speculation. Can't possibly comment on HS2. It's going to go, isn't it? I mean, from Birmingham to Manchester, it's just going to get cancelled, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a wider conversation to be had, because I personally, I think everybody's personal view is that you want to see the full thing rolled out from Euston to Birmingham to then on to Manchester and Northern Rail. So we want to see all of those infrastructure projects, but you've got to look at things, I think, in the round. Things have moved on quite significantly since 2009. I mean, I think when the project was first started, I mean, the people that have been managing this project, for what it's worth, I think have been totally useless, clearly, because the bill has spiralled from 30 billion to 100 billion. And everybody pays, you know, it is totally unfair on the UK taxpayer, whether you're in Manchester or whether you're in London, to wake up to headline after headline that this HS2 project is spiralling out of control. So those who have mismanaged that project, I think, need to go post-haste, and you need other people brought in. But the question is about, now, capacity. It's about connectivity between London, Birmingham and Manchester. It may be the case that actually you need more connectivity east to west in the north, which is something, you know, if you've got limited amount of finances, you've just got to have an open, honest conversation with the public about what is needed when it comes to rail capacity and decide thereafter. And the idea that it could, you know, terminate at Old Oak Common, which is in West London, as opposed to Euston, you know, some are criticising that, but I see that as an opportunity, perhaps.
Give over.
Well, like we saw in Stratford. We had a huge investment in Stratford during the Olympics, and we regenerated East London. Why can't we do the same for the West?
Because if you want to get into the middle of London, if you're coming from Birmingham, which is about as far as you're going to get now, and you want to head into the middle, you don't want to go to Old Oak Common. You want to go to the middle of town, probably. Interesting, you said they're being useless. Mark Thurston, who's about to leave his job as the chief executive of HS2, £676,000 he's earned in the last year, including a £39,000 bonus.
And and I think people hearing that will find that totally unacceptable.
Wow. I don't know. Think how much of a bonus you would have got if you get it to Euston.
Absolutely. I couldn't believe that Mark Harper said, I don't want to talk about trains, I want to talk about roads. And I just think that's such a... We need good public service transport, don't we?
Of course we do.
We really do need good trains and a great line, and I think it's just terrible if we never get it. But do let us know what you think. I mean, would you scrap HS2 now and just forget the money that's been wasted and spent on it, or do you think they should just plough ahead and get it done? GBnews.com.
We must praise the bus drivers today who are going to be taking people up and down the country where the trains are now on strike. So anybody that's, you know, in a cab or a cab driver or a bus driver, you thank God for them, because that's what's going to get this country. That's exactly how I'm getting there this afternoon.
Just going to sit back on the coach and have a snooze.
I will.
Charlie, thanks very much. We'll see you later on.
Thank you.
Now, as we're talking about the train strikes, members of ASLEF are walking out today in that long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions.
And these strikes, of course, are timed to hit the Conservative Party conference, which is in Manchester and begins tomorrow. And another strike has been planned for next Wednesday, when they'll all be wanting to go back home.
Yeah, well, earlier we did speak to the Transport Secretary. He said the union should put the offer that has been made to their members before they walk out again.
At the moment, the strike that's taking place today, it's clearly a political strike timed to coincide with the Conservative Party conference. You don't have to think very carefully to see that's the case. But look, there's a fair offer on the table. Train drivers get paid an average salary of £60,000 for a full-day, 35-hour week. The pay rise that's on the table that they won't put to their members would take that average salary to £65,000 a year. Now, look, I think most of your viewers will look at that and think that is actually quite fair and reasonable. It's effectively being funded from the taxpayer, because the rail industry at the moment, post-COVID, is financially not sustainable. So we've got to deliver a fair and reasonable pay rise with essential reforms, and that's what's on the table, and that's what I hope ASLEF will put to their members, you know, rather than carrying out what is effectively a political strike this weekend.
But neither side is going to get anywhere if they just dig their feet in, are they? Well, joining us now from outside London's Euston station is our national reporter, Thea Chikomba. And it's all... Oh, I was going to say it's all quiet there, but there clearly is a picket line behind you.
Yes, well, a very good morning to both of you. So for the last couple of months, ASLEF union members have argued if our pay doesn't go up and inflation goes up, then that's a real terms pay cut. And as you have just mentioned, I am at a picket line at Euston train station. It's one of many across the country where train drivers are arguing their point about pay, but also working conditions. Earlier this year, though, in April, they rejected a 4% pay rise over a period of 2 years in exchange for their working conditions having to change, and they've argued that's not what we want, considering the number of staffing that they have as well at the moment. And that comes, of course, as you mentioned, at a time when the Conservative Party conference is taking place in Manchester starting tomorrow, and many of those who are travelling up this weekend will no doubt be having to use other forms of transport due to the disruption on the rail this morning. And of course, I spoke to one gentleman just a few minutes ago who's travelled from Scotland, and he said he just about dodged the disruption that's going to be taking place this weekend. But he says, of course, if he was travelling later today, it would have disrupted his plans. Now, of course, people during the weekend will be travelling to football matches, for example, across the country, and they'll have to find different ways to travel. Network Rail say there is going to be disruption today, and tomorrow when trains are resumed, they'll start at a later time. So, of course, it comes at a time when everyone wants to be travelling around this weekend, and this is going to have an impact on them as they try and get around the country.
It will. Theo, thanks very much indeed. Brian's been in touch. Morning, Brian. He says, as a family, we only occasionally use the train network, but for us, driverless trains have to be the way forward. Much of the existing train network should be set up to accommodate this already. Utilising driverless trains is now vital.
I do think that in
that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that in 20 years' time, whoever's sitting here delivering a news programme for you will be saying, why didn't we get on with building better trains, better rails? Why didn't we do it 20 years ago?
It's probably be us two still here.
Do you think?
Yeah, it might be.
I think I might be knocking it a bit.
I mean, driverless trains might sound a bit scary, but they do it in London on, what do we call it, Docklands Light Railway. They're driverless trains. So, you know, it's possible, and it does happen. It's happened there for 20-odd years.
We've got to get on with these things, haven't we? We really must.
We do. Not that if you're a train driver, that's good news for you. Apologies.
Mind you, in 20 years' time, I'll be 90. I think that might be pushing it. I don't want to still be working at 90.
Be fine. Be fine. We'll wheel you in.
I mean, I know Angela Rippon's setting the bar really high at the moment. You know, the way she's dancing.
Can you do that with your leg?
Strictly, no.
No, neither can I.
I wouldn't even want to try it.
Neither would I.
She's amazing.
Right.
78 she is, so maybe she'll still be here reading the news at 90. But
she probably
don't
will.
know whether I will.
She probably will. Now for something a little bit different. Do you send a warning text to someone before you call them? If you don't, you're rude. That's according to etiquette experts at the Emily Post Institute in America. Quite what Americans know about etiquette, I do not know.
Ooh.
Well, they're totally different to us. I wouldn't listen to an American etiquette expert. It's different.
Well, other rules they're saying include not taking a call on speaker mode in public and not ringing someone multiple times if they don't pick up the first time.
So is it all a load of nonsense? Yes. Or is it time we establish ground rules where mobiles are concerned?
I think it's important that we understand that they're very intrusive, mobile phones, aren't they?
You can turn them off.
Yeah. Nobody likes to, though. You never turn yours off.
I do.
Do you?
Or put it on silent mode.
I put it on silent mode and then I forget
Yeah.
to switch it back on. And then when I do switch it back on, people have been harassing me, saying, why aren't you answering your phone? Why aren't you answering your phone? It's because I forgot.
Yeah. Well, let's talk to British etiquette expert Liz Brewer and author and journalist Julie Cook. Good to see you both this morning. Liz, let's start with you on this one. Should we follow the Americans' rules or not?
Well, we're not American, we're British, so we have our own rules. And I think it depends who you're calling, whether it's a business call, whether it's a social call. However, we've sort of grown up over the last 10 years using mobile phones, and I think we're already conscious of the fact that, you know, if you're calling somebody and it's to do with something serious or business, you do normally send a text and a warning because people are very busy nowadays. As a social call, I mean, I'm often trying to get my daughter, and young people today just don't seem to answer their phones anyway. So I sent a text, I sent an email, please call me as soon as possible, and eventually they called back. I think the world we're living in today, we still have to understand that people have busy lives and they're not glued to their phones all the time. Those with lives aren't. What I object to is watching people walking down the street and literally going like this and bumping into you. That I don't like. But as for a forewarning, no, it really depends what the call is and who you're calling.
Julie, what do you think is the most irritating thing about people who aren't paying attention to any sense of etiquette when they're on the phone? What irritates you most?
The worst thing for me has to be using your phone on speakerphone on public transport or at an event or something like that, where you're talking to other people or perhaps you're in a silent carriage and there's someone with their phone on speakerphone. There is nothing worse. And I do not understand how anyone can do that and not feel self-conscious, embarrassed or awkward. I've never done that, no matter what the urgency, no matter what the situation is. I just don't think speakerphone is ever appropriate, ever.
But would you text someone before a call?
I would if it was someone I didn't know very well, yes.
My
I'm a
son's
journalist and I
gone
often interview people, and I have to text someone first and say, may I phone you in a short while? So I do text people if I don't know them very well, yes.
Liz, what were you saying there?
I think she's saying she can't hear us.
Oh.
Her sound's gone off. Let's cut Liz out the picture just for the time being, because she's one or two technical issues there, which is very bad etiquette on our behalf. I do think, though, Julie, the idea that we have to bring in rules about all of this seems extraordinary. Most of us can handle this in our own way. We don't need to be told what to do we?
Well, Stephen, I think we do. I think we've become so prey to our phones. Our phones rule our lives. And I think we've forgotten how to be polite. You know, 20, 30 years ago, when phones were first sort of coming out, we were, I think, a bit more careful with them. It was a bit of a sense of, oh, well, don't speak in public, don't have it at the table, don't answer a call on a train loudly. Now our phones are endemic in every aspect of our life. You know, my kids would sit at the table with their phone if they could. I don't let them, but they would. And I think we need to understand that phones are not ruling us. We can rule them. We can turn them off. We don't have to answer every single call that comes in.
Quite right.
Right, well, we'll leave it there. It's a fascinating subject because they really have taken over our lives in some respect, haven't they? Yeah. I find most irritating so people just walking along the road, talking away like that, you know, and are they talking to me? And you suddenly realise they've got those little pods in and they're having a conversation quite loudly, just walking down the road. And you wonder how much attention they're paying to crossing the road, to traffic and things like that.
I'll tell you what I hate is when people do this. You see them walking down the road like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, the speaker's there.
Or they're like that, you know, like people on, You're Fired. What's it called? The Apprentice. You know, they all speak like that. It's like a dinner plate and they're speaking to it. Very weird.
Weirdos. That's very harsh. But there you go. Anyway, let's get a check on the weather for you today. Here's Aidan.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland, lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon with just a few showers for northwest Scotland and a fresh breeze here. Still some warmth, though, in the southeast.
A little bit of warmth. Very nice in the southeast. If you're in the southeast.
Yes, exactly.
Still to come, we're discussing one of the biggest moments of the week, the Home Secretary's controversial speech on immigration. That's next in News Matters. This is GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 7:30. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio and online. Oh. Oh dear,
One of
all
those
right.
irritating, silly coughs at the moment. Yes, I'm fine. Shall we look back now at one of the biggest stories of the week? In a speech, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, said asylum can't be granted to a person just because they're gay or fearing discrimination in their home country. Take a look now at what she said.
Who we allow to come into our country and become one of us is a fundamental issue. Without public consent, immigration is illegitimate. Dismissing as idiots or bigots those members of the public who express legitimate concerns is not merely unfair, it is dangerous. The second is much more cynical. The fear of being branded a racist or illiberal. Any attempt to reform the Refugee Convention will see you smeared as anti-refugee. Similar epithets are hurled at anyone who suggests reform of the ECHR or its court in Strasbourg.
Oh, well, her speech got a lot of reaction, including a response from the United Nations, who said the need is not for reform or more restrictive interpretation, but for stronger and more consistent application of the Convention and its underlying principle of responsibility sharing.
And even Elton John waded in on the debate. He said the Home Secretary risked further legitimising hate and violence against LGBTQ plus people.
Whilst our very own Andrew Pearce praised the speech.
It's no longer good enough to say, I'm gay, therefore I must be entitled to asylum in Great Britain. What, every single gay man and woman in Africa and Europe can come here because they're gay? Think about the Commonwealth, much loved by our beloved Queen Elizabeth II, who was head of the Commonwealth. She adored it. King Charles is now the head of the Commonwealth. In at least 20 countries in the Commonwealth, it is a criminal offence to be homosexual. Right, so are they all coming here too because they're asylum seekers and deserve refugee status? Of course not. I'm gay, I can say it. It is ridiculous.
Wow. Here to discuss it is Dr. Mike Jones, Executive Director of Migration Watch, and immigration lawyer Ivan Samson. Good to see you both this morning. Ivan, let's start with you, if we can. Is there a need for reform of the system, first and foremost?
No, there isn't. The global mechanism for the protection of refugees is enshrined in the Refugee Convention, worked satisfactorily for many, many decades. I just point out, Suella Braverman was actually right, said people being discriminated for asylum. That's actually the law. You must show persecution. She doesn't actually understand the law when she says, if you're discriminated, you can't come to the UK. Well, she's actually right. So she needs to really understand the law before she starts speaking about it. Discrimination is not grounds for seeking protection under the convention. What you have to show is that you're being persecuted. The difference is this. She's saying being gay is not a grounds for seeking protection. Well, the law says different, I'm afraid. The leading case on that is H.J. Iran. In Saudi Arabia, you face a death penalty for seeking, if you're a member of the LGBT community. So if somebody comes to our shore and says, I'm being persecuted because I'm gay, are we going to send them back? Is that what she's proposing?
Dr. Mike, what did you think of her speech?
I thought it was an excellent speech. It was well-balanced and well-argued. You've got to remember the UN Convention on Refugees was not designed as a universal document. It was designed for a small inflow of people trapped behind the Iron Curtain and people displaced from the Holocaust. But we live in a very different world. The Soviet Union has collapsed. The only living relic to that regime is North Korea. Many people are not traveling to the nearest safe country. They're traveling, through the Bosphorus, across the Central Med and through the Balkans. And they're making the journey through Europe and failing to claim asylum in various safe countries. And they're often coordinating with people traffickers to make that dangerous journey across the Channel. So I thought it was an excellent speech and long overdue.
But again, that highlights, Mike, doesn't it, how a lot of things are out of date. I mean, the idea that we should have to, have safe haven in the first safe country is in itself ridiculous now. I mean, you look at a place like Lampedusa, where there's more refugees than residents. I mean, it has to be shared out, as the UN was saying. It's about shared responsibility. Mike.
Sorry, I've lost sound.
Mike has lost sound. Excellent. Well, you respond to that, Ivan, because I mean, it's a fair point, isn't it? I mean, whereas
you're absolutely right. It is absolutely. I mean, if that was the position, then we'd never get any refugees at all, would we? Because we're an island. And also, what Mike said was completely correct. The Refugee Convention, what it's meant to is to give protection to those people who are being persecuted because of their nationality, race, because of their religion, or their sexual orientation or political opinion. It wasn't meant just to protect people behind the Iron Curtain. Simply not true. And in terms of the numbers, Suella Braverman's quoting 780 million people. Well, the UNCHR has already dismissed that because they say the number's 35 million. On top of that, 2/3 of people fleeing persecution remain in their own country. Of the 1/3 that do flee, these are UNCHR figures, not me giving you them, of the third that do leave their country, 7 out of 10 go to a neighbouring country. So the numbers are actually quite small. She mentioned gays. In the UK, we had 1.5% of those seeking protection who were gay. So this is simply scaremongering. She didn't have a UN Assembly platform to give a speech. She gave it in a hotel room full of what I can see, not a single member of the members of the convention were there. And not one member has agreed with her. Look, she cannot amend the convention. She'd need agreement of every single member. So it begs the question, why is she doing this? And I put it to you, she's doing it because it's electioneering. She's dog whistling to the right-wing voters. And it's an absolute disgrace. And it's embarrassing to have a Home Secretary like that in the UN Assembly.
Well, we'll leave it there for the moment. It certainly did cause ripples, didn't it? And made headlines this week. Thanks very much indeed, both, for joining us there.
It's interesting. It's interesting points. And I agree with the idea that there are some things in what she said which you do think, oh, well, maybe that's a fair point. And that's in what Andrew was reflecting, really. No, you can't just allow someone to come here because they're gay. But as Ivan was saying, well, that isn't when you dig under the surface. Well, that isn't the case anyway. You've got to show persecution, which is then a different ballgame, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not being gay, that's being persecuted for whatever reason. But there's no doubt we're living in a world now where migration is huge. All over the world, entire communities are moving, wanting to live somewhere other than where they are at the moment. And we're going to have to find ways to deal with it.
Yeah, we are. We are.
And I think that's what she was doing. I think she was testing the water. I think she knew she was being a bit controversial to get a debate going, because migration isn't going to go away. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
But I'll tell you what is interesting is I bet you've got a view on migration and this sort of migration or refugee status and all the rest of it. And whatever that view is, it's important to hear voices like Ivan's. Even if you disagree exactly with what he's saying, you've got to look under the surface a little bit. Then make an assessment.
Tell you what, you weren't very impressed with Mark Harper, the Transport Minister we were talking to earlier.
No.
Lynn in Devon says, how this man ever became a minister is beyond me. I think in no other industry would you appoint senior managers, decision-makers, who had absolutely no experience of the business.
Derek says, I'm 100% Tory, and Mark Harper just had my head in my hands. Terrible performance. Should have stayed in bed.
And Mark says Mark Harper won't announce HS2 during a Tory conference. It's absolutely crazy that the service will only run from Birmingham to Old Oak Common, and then passengers would have to hop onto another train into London. You're not very impressed with Mark Harper this morning.
No.
Keep your thoughts coming in, though, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.com.
Coming up, we're going to be hearing why Victoria Beckham is still angry about abuse that David got 20-odd years ago. That's in our headline makers next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At Jubes & Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
7:34, good morning. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Joining us to go through some of the day's headlines, journalist and author Ella Whelan and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. Thank you so much for coming in again.
Good morning.
Right, now, Candice, there's a Netflix documentary, is it, about the Beckhams?
Yes, yeah. So this story in The Sun, it's Victoria Beckham being interviewed about that very difficult time that she went through with David. This is featured in their Netflix documentary.
Which difficult time is this?
Well, it's after the 1998 World Cup, when David Beckham was red-carded, sent off, there was a 10-man team left, and they lost. And apparently he received so much anger, so much public anger, to the point where he became clinically depressed, she claims. She was pregnant as well at the time, so you can imagine she was pretty anxious too. And she says she still can't forgive the people who bullied him, as she put it. But look, I can imagine it was very difficult. It's very hard to imagine if you haven't been in that position. I mean, at the level that he plays football, and people put everything into these teams and their victory, and if you're seen as the person to blame, people will just go after you. And you know, Gareth Southgate has spoken about that, the former England coach. He said as well he went through that when he missed a penalty shootout.
Yeah, Marcus Rashford, do you remember all of those?
Yes.
They suffered terrible bullying and horrible abuse just for missing a penalty.
But she wants to kill people.
Which is
A little bit over the top.
Well, a part of the Beckham's appeal always has been that they are kind of extremely close. The family sells themselves well. Yeah, when I did see the headline about the difficult time with David, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be related to this. I thought it was going to be some of the other stuff surrounding that man's lifestyle. But the interesting thing about the whole sort of approach for football fans and footballers and things like that is that I think a lot of people, I'm not the biggest football fan, but I think a lot of people react badly to the kind of idea that football should become this very nicey nice, you know, the Gareth Southgate style of things, which is that everybody loves each other and we're all such good friends, and it's really just the taking part that's the point of it.
Oh, I don't think Gareth Southgate would say that. Come on.
I think that's how his style has been interpreted. Let's all shake hands and be nice. No one's saying that sportsmanship isn't important, but I think part of the passion and fun of football is that you want
the bad boys.
Well, you have a go when someone misses a penalty, surely, or someone goes wrong. You know, that's sport, isn't it?
Yeah, but I suppose it was always like that. Except now it turns into people who can keep having a go because of social
media.
Well, I don't know if social media was around in
Well, it wouldn't have been. No, I don't think it would have been then.
But it's the stress and the anxiety, and I think that's something that we can't understand unless we've been there in that position and kicked that ball or missed that penalty. And you often see when they miss it, they immediately go like this, and they're crying. I mean, they put so much into this, and they do it at such a high level.
That's why I think penalties are absolutely cruel. Anyway.
They are cruel.
Poor old David Beckham.
Let's have a look at private schools, Ella. The Telegraph's saying that under the Labour plans to charge VAT on private schools, claiming they're not charities, that it will mean an influx of foreign students.
Well, so this is the argument from the private schools, who are saying that if you know, this perennial debate about, what's an aspirational parent? What does it mean for families if there's this tax on or raising VAT on private schools? And the schools themselves have come out and said, well, if you do this to us, we're going to have to find the extra cash somewhere, and so a bit like universities. And so we're going to have to get lots of foreign students in and do things that way. So there's a bit of muscling in the debate from private schools. But obviously there's, I think for a lot of people, there is a certain section of society for whom this will be very important and mean a lot. There's, there are lots of aspirational parents who don't aspire to sending their kids to private school, but aspire for their kids to do very well, thank you very much, in state schools. I think the irritating thing about this for most people whom private school isn't a consideration is that we want to be having discussions about, concrete schools breaking down, the state of state schools, the state of education in state schools. And you almost kind of let them get on with whatever they want over there with the private schools. I've got no problem with someone wanting to pay thousands of pounds for their kids' education. More power to your elbow. Can we talk about the curriculum and
but VAT would raise some money, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, but again, it's this
to fix the concrete.
Some, I think, is the important point. Some. It's not the kind of... This isn't the solution to...
I just don't understand how there's a sort of pseudo-charitable status around private schools. They're businesses.
Yeah, you can make that argument, yeah. And I think, I think probably there is arguments for the reasons why they have this sort of charitable status. But I'm almost making the irritating point of saying most of us don't really care.
And what's interesting is
we want to talk about state schools.
It is pretty much unaffordable now for most middle-class people. I mean, private school fees are huge. Most people I know, and they've got middle-class professions. Maybe in the past they would have sent their children to private school. They cannot afford it now. These are doctors, lawyers, accountants. They all send their kids to the state school system.
Well, what's wrong with that? Isn't that a good thing?
See, for me personally, I like parents to have choice. They should be able to do what they genuinely think is best for their children. But I do think now most of them don't have a choice. I don't know anyone who was considering, well, maybe I will send my kid to the £35,000 a year private school. That's not a consideration for people anymore. The consideration is, where do I buy a house so I can get my kid into which good state school? And that's the reality now. I mean, it is becoming ever more unaffordable. It's not a middle-class thing anymore, sending your kid to private school.
It's horrendous. Can we take a look at Donald Trump? Because he's been doing, Candice, he's been doing his best imitation of Joe Biden. I think we can see it, can we? Let's have a look.
Interesting, but let's see. Look, some people say Biden's going to make it. Does anybody think he's going to make it to the starting gate? I mean, the guy can't find his way off of a stage. Look, here's a stage. Here's a stage. I've never seen this stupid stage before, right? I've never seen it. But if I walk left, there's a stair. And if I walk right, there's a stair. And this guy gets up. Where am I?
Well,
what do you reckon, Candice?
Well, this is his shtick. I mean, he's going to go for the ad hominem. I mean, Trump cannot resist that. And we all know, we've seen Biden on stage. He does have a tendency to ramble. He does get a bit confused. And Trump is not going to shy away from that.
No.
Just makes me wonder, though, is it going to work for him? is it going to work for him? You know, in the 2016 election, that sort of behaviour was quite novel and people were kind of shocked by it and they would laugh when he would say...
Yeah, but listen to the crowd. They love him. He knows how to absolutely whip up a frenzy.
That's his base, though, isn't it?
Well, yes, but it's his base who'll vote for him, and at the moment it looks as though it could do it.
The awkward fact is that a large part of America is laughing at Joe Biden at the moment, and that's not to say that it's not unkind to do. Who wants to laugh at an old guy getting confused? In the abstract, it's not very nice. But you know, I think you wish that Trump or someone else some opposition would come up and say that the point isn't that he can't find his way off a stage or that he's sort of getting too old or something, because who says what's too old for office? But the fact is he's tired in his politics. The Democrats are tired in their approach. But this is like Groundhog Day, isn't it? This is like a rerun again of the same election that we've had again and again in America, and it'll do no one any favours.
No, well, let's look at something which really matters then, should we? Which is pineapple on pizzas. Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Should there be pineapple on pizzas? I'm a yes man on this
I'm a yes.
No, I think that's
I used to be yes.
revolting.
And then in my pregnancy, I could not stand them, and since then I haven't touched them.
No.
I'm very against fruit and savoury. I don't even like pork and apple. I just think, keep it separate.
Yes, well, you're in the minority, because according to The Star, more of us like pineapple on our pizzas than not.
Well, this is, poll done by Pizza Express, who 37% of us won't touch it, but over half of us, 43%, say that we're into it. And the claim here in The Star is that this is like the new Marmite. And actually, the most interesting thing is that apparently 1 in 8 would never date someone who ate pineapple on their pizza.
Ridiculous.
So this is, I don't know whether that's a breath thing or whether it's a
I think if you don't like
thing.
I think you can find it really off-putting looking at pineapple on pizza. I can
Really?
understand.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know. There's something visceral about almost makes you feel sick if you don't like pineapple.
I love it. I've never had it with pineapple. I was once on a date many, many years ago with someone who had an egg in their burger, and he bit into the burger and the egg fell out onto the plate, and I had a headache and went home early.
Really?
Yeah. There was something about it that I think there is something about eating it's very intimate. You know, you can really
People
get
can
put
have
off by
strong
someone.
opinions. Like, people have very strong opinions these days on sourdough, whether it's nice bread or horrible bread. Oh, yes. The Spectator ran a piece on sourdough, and it did so well.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. Ella, Candice, thanks very much indeed. Let's go check on the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland, lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon with just a few showers for northwest Scotland and a fresh breeze here. Still some warmth, though, in the southeast.
On phone etiquette, Alison's been in touch. She says, I don't speak on speakerphone in public, but I wonder if it's any different to two people having a conversation in a coffee shop. I think it is.
I think it is.
Because
you
one of them
speak louder
doesn't...
for a start.
Oh, and one of them doesn't know they're being broadcast.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyway, keep your thoughts coming through on that. gbviews@gbnews.com. All the top stories heading your way in just a sec.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 30th of September. Today, Conservative MPs demand that taxes should stop rising before the next election. But is that enough ahead of the Tory party conference in Manchester?
There's more misery on the railways today as members of ASLEF walk out on strike again. Earlier, we spoke to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, and he insisted the latest pay offer is more than fair and it should be put to union members.
Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of that union, won't put that offer to the members. He sits on the Labour Party's national executive, and timing the strike for the Conservative conference can be seen for what it is. It's a political strike, and I think he should put the reasonable offer on the table to his members.
We're going to look back at the heartbreaking story of the stabbing in South London and ask if we can stop knife crime.
And Aidan, of course, has your weather.
It's a bright start for most of us this weekend, but not everyone will see that weather lasting. Find out when and where the rain turns up later today in the full forecast.
And our other Aidan has the sport.
Yes, indeed. Well, Europe have kicked off this morning in Rome in the Ryder Cup, exactly where they left off yesterday, and Fury v Usyk due to show down on December the 23rd. It's not going to be a white Christmas, but a fight Christmas.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. been talking about phone etiquette, and you know what irritates you about the way people use their mobile phones in public. But Paul in Northwich has come up with a corker, actually, because this is the ultimate sort of etiquette question when it comes to mobile phones. He says, I take my mobile to the toilet when I go. Anyone who calls me while I'm in there usually thinks twice about ringing me again.
Oh, vile.
Well, you say that, but, you know, if you're expecting an important phone call, don't you take your mobile to the loo with you?
I don't know. Kathy says doctors should text first. I've had calls from my doctor whilst in a busy waiting room.
Yeah.
Mark says bring back a landline.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Because the problem with the landline is, well, you can physically unplug it, I guess. But the nice thing about a mobile phone is, and I do it a lot, is I just put it on silent.
Yes, that's right.
Or airplane mode or something.
Yeah, that's right. Whereas I gave up my landline because I was getting so many of those, what do you call them? Cold calls.
Yeah.
All the blinking time, right through the night and day. And in the end, you just unplug it and then forget to ever use your landline again.
Yeah, I've had mine taken out. Which is sort of feels like a bit of a shame in a way, but it's just the way it's going, isn't it?
Yeah, no, we all have mobile phones, I suppose, now. And practically everybody, I think, has mobile phones now. In fact, there are more mobile phones than people in the UK, aren't there?
Oh,
because
well.
we tend to have... You've got two.
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, I thought you had.
No.
I've got several.
Have you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't use them.
Oh.
But physically in the house, there are about 2 or 3 spares.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I haven't got a spare. I'm waiting. I'm holding on. I'm desperate for a new one, but I'm waiting for one of these foldable things.
Oh. When are they going to come
There's
out?
a new one coming out first quarter of next year, which I got my eye on.
Phone like that?
Yeah.
So it opens like a book?
Like a big screen, yeah.
Ooh, OK. Oh, you do love your
Very
gadgets.
excited. Now, people think this is a second phone, but it's not. It's an insulin
Oh, that's
device.
right. Yes, I see.
So you've got 2
But you're all
phones.
always carrying those things around with you now.
Yeah.
And I carry one of those power banks as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really frustrating if your mobile phone runs out of juice, especially if you're in a long queue at the airport.
Oh, the airport
You know,
thing.
and you've got your boarding pass on it, and you're thinking, oh, gosh, if I don't get to the front very soon, you know, it's not going to
Yeah.
read out. So I now carry the power bank around with me. So you're just carrying so many bits and pieces all the time.
Yeah. Remind me, I've got to lock in for a flight, actually, today.
I'll remind you.
Because I've got to go to Hamburg next week for a couple of days. There you go. It's all very exciting.
Weather's very nice in Germany at the moment.
Oh, well, good. That'll be
enjoy
nice.
it.
Make a nice change. I don't know what the weather's going to be like in Manchester over the next few days, but it is Conservative Party conference. And before it even kicks off, there are headlines being made already this morning.
Of course there are. All eyes are on the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, after more than 30 Tory MPs have signed a pledge to their constituents saying that they're never again going to vote in this government anyway, for a rise in taxes.
Yes.
It's a sort of promise to their constituents.
It is a promise to their constituents. Does it mean anything, though? This pressure comes as the IFS has found the government will have overseen the largest set of tax rises since the Second World War by the next election. Liam Halligan says it's unlikely we're going to see a tax cut.
He hasn't got much fiscal wiggle room and much room for manoeuvre. You know, government borrowing in the 5 months to August was 40% higher than the same time last year. So the government really is pretty cash-strapped. I don't think Jeremy Hunt is going to unveil any tax cuts here at the party conference in Manchester.
The Chancellor has admitted that he wants to at least stop what he calls the vicious circle of ever-rising taxes. So could that be an election-winning policy?
Well, let's talk to former Cabinet Minister Sir Jake Berry, one of the MPs who has signed a pledge against any more tax rises. Good to see you this morning. I quite wonder why you're sort of making this statement, if you like, in the sense that if there were any more tax rises, it's the government signing its own death warrant.
Well, you're absolutely right. Taxes only go up because members of Parliament vote for it. It's just absolutely that simple. I'm really pleased to hear that the Chancellor has come out and said that he won't put taxes up. But all too often, we have seen these promises and pledges made by MPs across the political divide that haven't materialised. That is why this tax pledge is different. It isn't connected to the Conservative Party. It is a direct pledge from me to my constituents in Rosendale and Darwen and to the British people that I will not vote to put taxes up. And I heard in Anne's introduction, she was saying, is it just for this Parliament? No, it's for good. It's for keeps. It is a pledge that I will stick to as long as I am a Member of Parliament.
Why not go one step further and promise to your constituents that at the next available moment you will actually ask Jeremy Hunt for a tax cut?
Well, because, the Members of Parliament who signed it were all back in the we are not in charge of the budget. We can only govern what we do, which is to say that, my constituents in Ireland work really hard. The government is taking money away from them. I don't think you should take any more. But what will happen is as taxes go down, this pledge bites and they can't go back up.
Yeah, look, there's a big question here, isn't there, as to priorities, and say no more tax rises. Well, a lot of people would cheer on that. But how do we tie into the pressures the government is under, but also the desperate need that there is to bring everything else down, to bring inflation down, to get the Bank of England to start reducing interest rates?
I don't know if you can hear me, but I've lost the sound.
OK, apologies.
Yes, we've clearly got something
We've got a glitch.
wrong there.
We've got a glitch going on.
We've got a glitch in the system.
That's happened three times today. But it's these other issues that are going to even more than reducing taxes, is going to have a bigger impact on us, which is, reducing everything else, inflation, interest rates and all the rest of it.
Well, they've got a lot on their plate, haven't they? But it's very interesting what Sir Jake Berry there said when he said even if taxes, and hopefully they will at some point, go down, their pledge will still stand. They'll never vote again for another tax rise.
Within this Parliament?
No, he said not. He said beyond.
Did he say beyond?
Yeah, he said beyond. And that is interesting.
That's a little bit odd, I think, in the sense that who knows if he was still an MP in 10 years.
Yes, because situations change.
Situations change.
Yeah. OK, shall we move on to the other big story of the day? Members of the Train Drivers Union, ASLEF, are walking out again today as the long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions continues.
Yeah, the strike's time to hit party conference in Manchester. Another strike has been planned for next Wednesday. That's when people are, of course, trying to get home from Manchester.
Now, earlier we spoke to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, and he said the union should put the offer that's been made to their members before they walk out again.
At the moment, the strike that's taking place today, it's clearly a political strike timed to coincide with the Conservative Party conference. You don't have to think very carefully to see that's the case. But look, there's a fair offer on the table. Train drivers get paid an average salary of £60,000 for a full-day, 35-hour week. The pay rise that's on the table that they won't put to their members would take that average salary to £65,000 a year. Now, look, I think most of your viewers will look at that and think that is actually quite fair and reasonable. It's effectively being funded from the taxpayer because the rail industry at the moment, post-COVID, is financially not sustainable. So we've got to deliver a fair and reasonable pay rise with essential reforms, and that's what's on the table, and that's what I hope ASLEF will put to their members, rather than carrying out what is effectively a political strike this week.
Well, joining us now from outside London Euston Station is the General Secretary of the ASLEF Union, Mick Whelan. A very good morning to you. Thanks for coming onto the programme. The Transport Secretary there said it's a fair and reasonable offer and you should put it to your members. What's your response?
Well, we're standing here, you'll see a cutout behind me of Where's Wally with Mark Harper's face on it. We haven't seen Mark Harper since January of last year, when he took over and he told me that the Rail Minister was going to facilitate talks. Before those talks took place, they put out an offer that we hadn't seen, that ripped up every term and condition that we had and was untenable. And then they begged us to come back to the table, and we set up a framework around that discussion about what we would do. And then they came back after we'd taken all our red lines out of discussion, tried to make it work, and that gave us an offer all our red lines in. They set this up to fail. And every time they say fair and reasonable, I see the words lies and deceit. Every time they say put it to your members, we've been dealing with these companies for 23 years. And our members' policy is we can only put out deals that we recommend, and they know that. And they've known that for 2.5 decades. The Minister knows that. The Department knows that. The Treasury knows that. And by the way, we do not work for the government. We work for all those railway companies that are making hundreds of millions of pounds and paying dividends to their shareholders. Yet train drivers are going half a decade without a pay rise.
So what is the big stumbling block here as far as you're concerned? Is it about pay and pay rises, or is it about those working conditions and the changes that they want to bring in?
Well, the first part is we're dealing with people only operating in bad faith. And the second thing is the changes aren't modernisation, they're Victorian terms and conditions. And if they truly want those terms and conditions, they're going to have to pay for them. Nobody's going to give up hundreds of millions of pounds of productivity for effectively a 20% pay cut. We haven't had a pay rise in 5 years. And there is no train driver in the country that would vote for it. Now, what they have voted for, because of the bad faith of the companies and the government, is serially 3 times 92 to 99% for action short of a strike and for strike action, because that's their voice saying they reject the deals that are out there.
I mean, the trouble is, Mick, our viewers and listeners heard what Mark Harper was saying earlier. They're hearing what you're saying now. And even if they actually think both of you are being fair and reasonable from your different positions, we're still getting nowhere. All this time later, there are still train strikes going on. You're still not getting what you want. The government clearly isn't getting what they want. How is it going to end, and when could it end?
Well, when we get some faith and honour in the process, that would assist it. At this moment in time, we have a government that is putting the railways into managed decline, closing ticket offices, ripping up investment, quite openly talking about truncating HS2, while cutting the tax duty on airlines, while investing in roads. This is a government that doesn't care about railways, and this is all part of them deterring people from travelling on the railways. And people think the last 2 fares rises have gone into the pockets of the workers on the railway. Well, they haven't, because we haven't had a pay rise for 5 years.
What difference would it make if Mark Harper sat down with you?
Well, he'd have to convince me first that he was going to be truthful and honest and not dissemble anymore. He'd have to convince us that he truly wanted this to work. And then, but there's some hope, if we do see him, that something will happen. Because at the end of the day, it's the dead hand of government that seems to be guiding these talks.
The bottom line with any negotiation is, of course, both sides need to give way. So, what would you give way on? Because it seems like you're determined to really stand
nothing
your
at the
ground.
moment, because there's nothing for us to give way on. Well, let's put this into context. I don't have a problem in Scotland. I don't have a problem in Wales. I don't have a problem in freight. I don't have a problem in open access. I don't have a problem in Merseyrail. I don't have a problem in Eurostar. I don't have a problem in the Elizabeth line. We've done 14 pay deals in the last 12 months. We have a Westminster-driven problem. That tells you the issue we've got.
And we were talking to the Transport Minister, about an hour ago, trying to get him to talk particularly about HS2 and whether that's ever going to happen. He said he didn't want to talk about railways today, he just wanted to talk about roads and about car drivers. How do you feel? I mean, is there an agenda going on here? Because we are all worried that if this goes on for very much longer, we're not going to have a railway system.
Well, I think we're always going to have a railway system, but the lies about levelling up at the Northern Powerhouse have come to fruition. Kemi Badenoch talking about people having to use their cars outside London is because they deregulated buses, took 100 million bus journeys out of the system. You can't use public transport where it doesn't exist. But we do know where you build it, they will come. And the success of the Elizabeth line, with it being oversubscribed by 140,000 people per day, using it more than we expected, and will pay for itself in less than half a decade, shows what can be done.
How concerned are you with the state of the railways in terms of the decline that we've seen post-COVID? We know fewer people are using the railways, and obviously that's being continued by the ongoing strike action. I mean, that's, inevitable, isn't it? But at what point do you think members of the public will turn around and say, well, we're never going to trust the railways again?
Well, the government's own figures for August show that we've 98% of pre-pandemic footfall Monday to Friday and 104% of footfall at weekends. So footfall's come back. Now, bearing in mind they haven't put the timetables back, as some of the companies only running 70% of the trains they used to run before, and many of them are running shorter trains. Actually, what's driving people off the railways is the government's lack of investment and continuing increasing the fares. We've seen all across Europe companies reduce their fares to encourage people to use public transport. We've seen all across Europe people banning planes on short haul to encourage people to use trains and other methods of transport. And we've seen in China alone, they've built 25,000 miles of high-speed track, and we haven't built one.
What do you think of what's happening with HS2, or at least what's not happening with HS2?
Well, our view of HS2 in 2009, and bear in mind, it's the government that's managed it for the last 12 years, was they should have started on the south coast, started at the top end of Scotland and met in the middle. And then we would have had all these arguments about another train going to Birmingham. But also, one of the first things they did was take out the spur from HS2 into HS1. The whole principle of HS2 was to get on in Manchester or Leeds or somewhere and get off in Frankfurt or Amsterdam or in Paris. Nobody wants to get off in Old Oak. And how much is it going to cost to build the infrastructure to get people from Old Oak back into London? Right? The whole purpose of it finishing Euston was to get people to go down the Euston Road to get into HS1. But if we don't build it, we know that Euston itself will be closing during the peaks, according to the government's own study that's in the Independent today, because they won't be able to deal with the passenger numbers they have. We have a growing population. We need more capacity, not less. If we actually do want to deliver any of Kyoto, Paris or the 1%, we need HS2 in full to free up the capacity on the west coast, the east coast for freight alone. Never mind what it will do for regional railways and interurban railways across the country.
Yeah, well, look, that's a very fair point. A final point before we let you go, because obviously that drill's getting in the way a little bit. Mark Harper said, you know, you're striking as people are trying to get to Manchester and you're striking as people are trying to get home from Manchester. He says this is nothing more than political.
Well, it's not political, it's industrial. Mr Harper and his cronies for the last 16 months have been accusing us of attacking all sorts of events on strike days, which we haven't done. Because we haven't seen Mr Harper, we decided to make a point today. Where's Wally? Where's Mark? Come and see us. We are striking today to get the attention of the Tory party and the government to resolve this dispute.
Mick Whelan, really good to talk to you. Appreciate it. Thanks for battling against that road drill there. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, yeah.
Well, look...
I must say, when you hear him speak, you can't help but think, yes, we need a good rail service in this country. We need a forward-thinking rail service, because I come back to the fact that in 20 years' time, we'll look back and say, why wasn't it built 20 years ago?
Yeah, I do think as well, it's why it's beneficial to... I mean, the strikes, sometimes they really get on my nerves because it just seems, you think, what is going on? What is happening? Because it's how it affects us, isn't it? But actually, when you talk to someone like Mick Whelan, it was very balanced, very considered there, and it gives you a bit of food for thought. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily agree with him, but it gives you some food for thought.
And the fact that they haven't seen Mark Harper themselves...
That worries me.
...for a year, that worries me, because how can you ever get to an agreement if you don't actually meet and talk?
Yeah, it's no good just putting it onto a rail minister. You've got to get the bosses there, don't you? To actually sit down and discuss this, head of the department. You know, that would be a start, if nothing else. Anyway, if you've got a view on that, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com. If you're a train driver or anything else in the rail industry or just a big train user, let us know. I just think it's really interesting to hear a side that you don't necessarily think you're going to agree with, but it just gives you that little bit of inkling.
How can they ever agree if they don't meet?
Well, yeah.
Tell you what you're very worked up about today, and that's pineapple on pizza.
Oh, right.
Oh, my goodness. Tessa says, no.
Dave is from New York, where they don't do it, and says, no. Actually, best pizza I've ever had is in New York. Mm-hmm. Lovely.
Sarah says, no to pineapple on pizza. Crazy.
Yet, Susie says, my favourite is Chineapple. Her own invention, pineapple and chilli on a pizza. Now that I could go with.
I couldn't do that. Oh, no. Ray says, yes, it's a must. Pineapple, cheese, ham, tomato. Lovely and delicious. That's just everything on a pizza.
Yeah, Jason says, I'd never have pineapple on a pizza. Sweet and savoury, never together for me.
No,
See, I
love sweet and savoury together.
Yeah, but I don't really think of pineapple as being sweet.
Oh, it is very sweet.
Not when it's cooked, though.
Well, yes, it is.
You think?
Yeah, still sweet.
Never strikes me as being... I tell you what I like on a pizza. So margherita, pineapple, sweet corn, and jalapeno.
Jalapeno. I like very, very thinly sliced mushrooms.
Oh.
Gorgeous. Making me very hungry.
Yeah, my mouth waters.
I think I'm going straight home for a pizza.
I've not eaten since lunchtime yesterday.
No, that's a long time as well, isn't it? That's meant to be very good for you, though, isn't it?
Is it?
Taking long stretches of fasting. Yes.
Oh, right. Well, it's only because I wasn't feeling very well
Dr.
yesterday.
Michael Mosley would approve. I think he's part of that.
I went to
the
bed.
longer you have between meals, if you can have a really long gap between meals and then go to bed so you're not eating there as well. So you're waking up, some 12 hours without eating is good.
Oh, that should be stick thin by now, then.
Well, you are. You're doing well, aren't you?
I could do a bit better. 8:22, let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom this morning. And the teenage girl who died after a school coach crashed on the M53 has been named by police as Jessica Baker. The driver also died. Police have confirmed 58 people were involved, 4 children taken to hospital. A 14-year-old boy has life-changing injuries.
The Prime Minister said he is slamming the brakes on harebrained schemes such as blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limits and low-traffic neighbourhoods. Speaking in The Sun, Rishi Sunak vowed to focus on policies that stem what he called the relentless attack on motorists. More details are expected to be set out in the Transport Secretary Mark Harper's speech to Conservative members on Monday.
Boris Johnson has said delaying or cutting the HS2 route to Manchester is a betrayal of the north of England. He said we must be out of our minds if Conservative ministers are considering axing the northern legs of the high-speed rail project. His comments come, of course, as the party prepares for conference.
Well, while you're waiting for a non-existent train to take you anywhere today, you'll want to know what the weather's like.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland, lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon with just a few showers for northwest Scotland and a fresh breeze here. Still some warmth, though, in the southeast.
Well, still to come for you this morning, we're talking about knife crime, as there's been another incident in London this week, and it seems to be just an ongoing issue with attacks on young people, doesn't it? We're going to talk to campaigner Gaynor Bell and try to ask, how do we stop all this from happening? That's next in News Matters on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Now, this week, a 15-year-old girl was stabbed to death on her way to school in South London.
Witnesses say that Eliane Andam had just gotten off the bus with a group of friends and then she was attacked.
Well, the boy, aged 17, has been remanded in custody after appearing in court. He's also been charged with the possession of a knife.
Now, obviously, we're not going to talk about that particular case. Somebody has been charged already. But knife crime, as fatal stabbings in England and Wales remain at a record high. We've heard calls for more stop-and-search powers for the police. Would that do any good?
Well, on Thursday's breakfast, we featured experts and parents, including a former Met police officer, a government minister, and Mark Prince, whose teenage son, Kian, was stabbed to death in 2006.
As soon as I found this news out yesterday, that was my day. Finished.
Yeah.
I was just stuck, just like this. All I could picture was the parents, the family, the little girl, the same as my boy. What was her last moments like? What was her thoughts? What the kind of fear was going on in her? Poor little girl, man.
Do you want to see more stop and search?
I'm certainly not against that. There are powers there, and local police forces can use them when necessary, when there are issues on the ground. We need to get these knives off the street.
And I think lots of people feel as though stop and search is that kind of interventionist method that does create so much controversy, that they are looking for alternative methods because it's so caught up in a political storm. People don't want to refer to it so often. And Sadiq Khan in 2015 said that he wanted to clamp down on stop and search with all of his power. And that's been a kind of a political back and forth ever since.
I don't want our police doing social work. I don't want our police doing what they so often call community engagement. There's two communities they need to engage with. Number one, victims of crime, and number two, perpetrators of crime.
Nothing's been done, and you're seeing these things happen. Knife crime epidemic now, so we're having a knife crime pandemic. I talked about this happening
that after Kian died, that this is what you're going to have if you don't put something in place.
Well, we're joined now by somebody who knows only too tragically all about this. Gaynor Bell, who's very much a knife crime campaigner now since losing her own son back in 2000. Thanks for joining us, Gaynor. And obviously, our commiserations. I mean, what a terrible tragedy that you've been through too. But obviously, all of these years later, you must have thoughts on how on earth we can get to grips with knife crime. What can we do? Would stop and search help?
Stop and search, yes. But unfortunately, sometimes they hide knives down drain pipes and down grids and pull it up later. You know, sometimes they have them hidden quite often. But gosh, over 20 years now, I've been beating the drum, if you like, saying education, education. And you'll see a lot of people saying exactly the same thing. We need to get into schools at a very early age. I'm talking about junior school, and carry on, put on the curriculum and get it through to children exactly what it's like. We have many, many charities going around doing it, but they're funded for, say, one session and then come out. That's not good enough. It needs to go onto the curriculum to tell children from an early age, right up until they're leaving school, how it affects the victims, i.e. myself, and how, you know, they don't realise how does it affect their family. You know, I shouldn't say I have sympathy for their families, but I do, because all of a sudden, right out of the blue, their son, their loved one is locked away for life. And they get stories from friends and peers saying, oh, it's easy in prison. I've been into nearly quite a lot of prisons and seen what it's like. Yes, we need to be stronger, but having that door shut on them is a hard, sentence. How it does affect? It just doesn't affect me. I'm over 20 years now, and it still feels like yesterday. My son, I think, I've lost two sons. One was killed by a drunken driver at 16, and then Stefan, that was Adam. Stefan was killed at 22. And people think, oh, they must have been into drugs or they've been in this place. But no, it can happen to anyone. Like we saw that poor young girl, And the only thing to stop this is to get the knives off the street. But when I say get the knives off the street, go to the core of it. I've actually said this for so many years. All these charities should come under the same umbrella, running the same programme in the schools and stay there, not go in for one session and come out, because the children forget. They absolutely forget. I used to do a programme, because I know this has happened just like...
Forgive me, Gaynor, for interrupting, but you said we need to get to the core of it. What is the core of it? Because it's something that's almost sort of cultural, isn't it, now that young people are saying, oh, we need knives for protection, which is crazy.
For protection, years ago, they used to put a comb in the pocket as the sort of accessory. Now it's putting a knife in the pocket. And yes, a lot of it is for taking them out for protection. Just one instance, I've been to young offenders' prisons. One young boy had been stopped for having a knife. And I said to him, why the hell did you take that knife out with you? And he pulled his trousers down and showed me a big slash across his bottom. He said, I was making sure if they tried to attempt it again, I had a knife in my hand. He didn't use it. I can tell you cases of where lads have gone out with a knife, no intentions of using it. And this is what we try and get through to it. But if they're confronted and pull that knife out and wave it, and then all of a sudden they're attacked, that knife can be taken off them, used against them. They've turned around and said, I didn't mean to do it. So this is where going in schools and explaining to them how these things can happen and how their life can change around. I always say to them, there's two roads you can go on. This road where you can make something of your life, or this road where you stay exactly where you...
You said at the beginning that it's about education. That's what you've been banging on about for the last 20 years. So the main things, if you were going into a school now, you'd want to illustrate is that if you take a knife out, even as you said, with no intention of using it, it's very likely that it will be used on you, actually. And that if you do use a knife on somebody else, you're going to be locked up for life. Are there any other lessons you'd want to say?
It's basically, as I say, drumming through to them. I'll just tell you, giving them scenarios. This is part of lessons I used to do with my very good friend, unfortunately passed away now, as well. We used to go into a school and do sort of a reenactment of somebody ringing up and saying, "Hey, mate, come out here with your knife," you know. Now, they've got to keep that street cred, haven't they? So instead of saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm coming with," and this has happened so many times, to turn around and give an excuse so your street cred isn't lost. You know, my mum's just gone in hospital, my little son's brother's broke a leg. To give that excuse not to go out, because a lot of them go out on them streets and got to keep the face with the friends, with the peers, with that knife. And this is when we go into school of telling them alternatives of what to do. Just very quickly, I tutored a young lad and said, well, he was in prison. I can't go out and do this. I can't go out and be a mechanic, you know. And I said, he was calling his, I won't say the word, what he was calling his tutor. Very cut a long story short, after talking to him for so long and telling him which road does he want to choose, he went in the prison, went back on his mechanic course. He ended up still in touch with him, opening his own garage. It's getting through to them which road you want to go on. Do you want a nice house, nice holidays, nice everything, or do you want to spend your life in prison? And it's telling them the circumstances and getting through to them. And the only way to do that is from an early age of asking them what life do they want. Put the knives down. Don't go out with a knife. If you feel intimidated by your friends, give an excuse. There's always excuses out there.
No, look, it's the valuable lessons, and all power to you, Gaynor. Really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
It is that early age, quite right. I'll tell you what I saw yesterday, driving home from the show yesterday. Police cars not that far from here, and I saw a police officer walking back across the road, holding by the tip, holding a knife, a big knife.
Gosh.
And you just think, what on earth where's that come from?
But as Gaynor said, they actually, I mean, in some cases, it's sort of organised. They hide knives so that they're actually not found on them. They hide them under hedges or behind bins or something. There are well-known places that if you know, you'll be able to get hold of a knife.
But it's the whole thing. If you've got a knife, then you could use it.
Yeah. Or it can be used against you.
Yeah, but whether you intend to use it or not, if it's there,
it'll be used, won't it, by somebody?
But anyway, all power to Gaynor Bell and
gosh, what a lovely lady,
her.
and what terrible tragedy she's had to endure in her life.
Awful. OK, let's change tack a little bit, should we? And see what's happening in the world of sport. Oh, are we going to a break?
I'm not sure.
No, I don't think we are. No, we're going to
sport.
I think
it's Aidan. He's sort of sat here, so we might as well say hello to him.
How you doing, all right?
Yeah, all right. Ryder
Nice
Cup, what's happening?
Yeah, quick update. We covered it extensively a couple of hours ago, didn't we? But in 4 of the matches this morning, Europe, having started yesterday at breakneck speed, are winning in 3 of the 4 matches. Tommy Fleetwood and Rory McIlroy steaming ahead in their one. Guess what they're known as?
Fleetwood Mac.
They are indeed.
We know.
They are indeed, and they're everywhere at the moment. They really are. So they're my concern about this is that with Europe looking so unassailable, I'm worried we won't get a real good finish tomorrow night. In theory, it could all be over today to regain it outright. So I'm hoping there'll still be some left for tomorrow night. So, but yeah, in terms of other sport, yeah, we've got the boxing as well.
Boxing.
We've got
Fury and Usyk.
Absolutely. We've been waiting a long time for this one to be etched in stone. It looked as if it was going to go ahead in March. Talks broke down because of what was reported to be Tyson Fury's excessive demands on the purse. Now, what he was really waiting for was and Usyk as well, I think you'd have to say, but they're waiting for Saudi season to open. That's where they really want this fight to take. Because
is that because it's bigger money?
Without doubt. I mean, the maximum Wembley could have garnered was probably about 100 million. We're looking at a purse of around 150 million this time. But this will be the biggest heavyweight fight of the 21st century I would imagine. It's taken probably 18 months to get it done. I mean, Tyson Fury's retired about 8 times in that time. However, he does have an MMA fight to contend with on October the 28th against Francis Ngannou, which means that, in theory, he has to come through that test before Usyk happens. This fight is scheduled for December the 23rd. Nominally, but it can happen any time up until March. So if Fury was to lose against Ngannou in MMA on October the 28th, it does allow him extra time to prepare for a fight, and they can go as late as March. But we are looking at December 23rd. It's a bit peculiar for a fighter to take on the biggest fight of his career just 2 months after fighting an MMA fight, but that's Tyson for you, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. But this is if
take any prisoners.
If Tyson Fury wins this, he'll become the first fighter since Lennox Lewis back in late 1999 to be an undisputed title holder, which means he'll hold all 4 belts at one time.
He'd probably wear them all at the same time as well. I don't know what it is about him. I sort of don't want to like Tyson Fury, but he's just an impressive fella.
He is, exactly. Yeah. He's not far from your neck of the woods.
No, we're very, very close. Yeah. He lived on Walney for a while. I don't know if they still do.
We've got a massive house. I know that.
OK, well, we are going to take a break now, but coming up, are the days of men having a wet shave over? As more than half, apparently, of men say they'd rather have facial hair. That's on our Headline Makers next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
go again, time for Headline Makers. Joining us to go through some of the day's headlines, journalist and author Ella Whelan and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. And it's lovely to see you back.
Hi.
Candice, first of all, the amazing pictures of these floods in New York.
Yes, yeah. So these are the worst floods in years. The drains are not clearing the rainwater. And it is quite serious. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, has declared a state of emergency. However, one thing that we can say that it's not a total state of peril. The public schools are remaining open. They're telling people to get to higher ground who live in the basement flats, and the subway has been suspended. But this just keeps happening, sadly. So, you know, they're going to really have to figure this out because, I mean, what are people just every time there's heavy rainfall, there's this sort of crisis.
There was, I mean, it was something like 8 inches, though.
Yes.
Now it's a lot of rain.
Yes, yeah. Well, since Hurricane Ida, I mean, there's just been so many problems with flooding now in New York.
And the tunnels under the Hudson and everything like that, they must be flooded, mustn't they?
Yes, yeah.
That's how New Yorkers get to work.
I know. Well, exactly. They've got a whole subterranean system of living and transport, and that's in peril. But like I say, you know, like they're still keeping the schools open and stuff, so it's not a total crisis.
No.
Yeah.
There does seem to be, I mean, there was this sort of the pest problem, the rat problem in America, in New York recently, that the city infrastructure does seem... I mean, I don't even want to know what's happening with the rats and the flooding and all the rest of it at the moment, but there is some serious problems in New York sort of city infrastructure, whether it's rubbish or drains, or it all seems to be sort of... falling apart.
Well, talking about flooded roads in New York, what about our 20-mile-an-hour zones and low-traffic neighbourhoods in the UK, Ella? It's in the Eye and the Guardian. The PM saying he's the Prime Minister for motorists.
Well, yes.
He's decided.
And you know, if the sort of Uxbridge by-election was anything to go by, which I think a lot of politicians are taking as their kind of temperature check, then the issue of restrictions on driving, whether it's ULEZ or LTNs in other parts of the country or speed limits, is something that people really care about. And I just wanted to pull out this article in The Guardian because it gives the opposite view, which is that a lot of, myself included, would be on the position of saying that LTNs are a problem, that you should have more choice by allowing people to be able to drive as well as use public transport. But a joint statement from Ramblers, Sustrans, British Cycling, Cycling UK, Living Streets and Bikeability Trust, who are all, you know, pro-cycling, pro-walking, I think it's fair to say sort of anti or at least discouraging of car use, have released this statement saying that actually that the Prime Minister's announcements will leave people feeling that they had no choice but to drive.
Oh, give over.
Yes, that was my initial reaction. But there's they sort of say that that is going to re-entrench congestion. They talk about the fact of clean air and pollution and things like that. But it's interesting that they're using the language of choice, because I think that does raise a question for the Prime Minister, which is those of us who like driving, who need to drive, you know, are welcoming these moves. But also, that doesn't mean that, a bit like your conversation with Mark Harper, you just don't do anything about public transport, or you don't do anything about cycling, or that you can just say, well, people can drive, case closed. No, you do actually still have to look at the trains and the buses.
And they're so confused on that. I mean, you know, not necessarily saying that Rishi Sunak is saying this, but the whole drive to net zero is to get people to use more public transport. But there's very poor connectivity in the north, train connectivity. So many train stations don't have accessibility. I mean, I went to a train station the other day and someone said, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't even come here. You know, and it's such a problem. You know, there's not that practical getting down to business. In terms of what Rishi Sunak wants to do with cracking down on these 20-mile-per-hour zones and traffic fines, I think there does need to be a bit of consumer protection for drivers, because I think the experience is becoming quite poor. All these things are being imposed from the top down, and no one's actually looking out for drivers who the experience is becoming miserable for them, especially when you get these fines, which are huge for very minor infractions.
Yeah, well, I would agree on that. I know 50% of you will not, because when we talk about these 20-mile-an-hour zones, it's split 50-50, actually.
That's interesting.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you'd think it would... Well, I would just assume you'd all agree with me.
I know.
But there you go. Yeah, there
Yes.
you go. Does your husband, Ella, have a beard?
He does. He does. He's always had a beard. And I don't know whether that's a hangover from he couldn't grow one for a very long time, so maybe he holds on to it as, sorry, Ian,
because
there's pressure, but...
There's a report in The Telegraph saying that more than half of men now have facial hair.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it's so generational, it's generationally split. My father always wet shaves. I've never seen him with a beard ever in my life. And he would never, and he would, I think, still think of having a beard as being a bit scruffy or not quite put together. But that's completely different for young men. They just don't see. There might be but I don't think people wear the shaggy beards, but stubble, or even there's a picture in the Telegraph of Ben Affleck and George Clooney, people who are paid to look very good and put together, wearing beards as a kind of
a sharp beard.
Yeah, but it's seen as stylish. It's seen as normal, and I think it is interesting that kind of the way in which men present themselves in society has changed so dramatically. Would you ever have a beard anymore?
No, I couldn't grow one.
Right. Okay.
I would have liked to be when I was younger. I would have liked to be, but I can't grow one properly. It's just too patchy, and now is white.
Well,
I know.
Salt and pepper.
George Clooney has
white yes, maybe. But I'll tell you what's coming back. You see, beards. We're talking about beards. That's old hat now, in a sense, because a lot of the younger, but certainly the soldiers that I know now, it's moustaches.
Well, I like moustaches, personally.
You see, I don't, because to me, that smacks of 1970s.
Oh, it makes you think... See, it makes me think of, like, Clark Gable. See, that's who I think of. And he was very... He was very dashing.
Just not a look I like at all.
Oh, no, I quite like it. Like Gone with the Wind, Clark Gable.
I can't imagine kissing a man with a moustache.
Right, yeah.
No, it'd be all prickly.
Well, not if it's too long and kind of, there's a hygiene question, isn't there? Bits of your dinner getting stuck in.
Oh, yes.
So Ian's beard, is it a big beard or is it like a stubbly beard?
It's just a stubbly beard. I mean, he's not particularly...
hygienic?
No, he's not. Tree surgeons don't care that much about how they look, which is a nice thing. But I think that there is an industry around beards now as well. You can buy beard oil, not just beard trimmers, but all these different kind of things, combs and things like that. I think when it gets to that level, it's often people who are got a lot going on here, not much going on up there, that they get a bit obsessed with the lower regions,
But you get the razor clubs now. You can belong to the razor clubs. It's like this niche little market.
Well, there's money in it all.
Yes.
Well, I wonder what people prefer. I mean, because this is the other thing, is that what do GB News viewers prefer? Is it a sort of... Is this move towards beards fine, or is it just lazy, or do you like a clean-shaven man? See, I do like clean-shaven men, and the one time that Ian he's going to kill me for this, he ever did it, he looked about 10 years younger, and we both went, oh, I'm not sure about that.
But when someone takes off their beard, they look so different. I remember when my dad first shaved his beard, and as kids, we just wanted him to grow it back instantly because we didn't recognise him without his beard.
I like the clean-shaven look.
And a lot of people say that, how as you get older, particularly if you're a woman, you get sort of turkey neck. When men get older, they can grow a beard which defines their chin line. So they still got a good sort of chin line,
isn't it?
Which a lot of women lose.
We grow beards too, but we're expected to pluck them out.
You're meant to electrolyse them or whatever it is, aren't you? There you go, let them grow.
Very attractive.
That's what I say. We're almost outside. Just very quickly, I know this is yours again, Ella, but just in 30 seconds, tell us about this football team in the Times.
The poor Vicky Park Rangers were due to play on the AstroTurf pitch at Stepney Green, and they got locked out by the boys. This girls' team who got locked out by the boys who were, laughing and jeering at them. It was an administrative mess up. But there is this row happening where you have, a certain amount of spaces, and the girls' team have to be allowed to play, but they're muscling in on the boys' territory, and so tensions and local pitches.
Hijinks. That's what I like about the hijinks. Ella, Candice, been good to see you both this morning.
Thank you
very much indeed.
Let's find out what the weather is doing for us all. Here's Aidan.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland, lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon with just a few showers for northwest Scotland and a fresh breeze here. Still some warmth, though, in the southeast.
On phone etiquette, because this keeps coming up, getting loads of you going this morning, Cara says, my wonderful NHS hearing aids work through my phone. So the caller's voice comes into my ears and the voice is transmitted through the hearing aids, rather than having to put it on speakerphone, which apparently is not the right thing to do.
That's brilliant.
Good idea, that, isn't it?
Phone etiquette. We've all got to learn it.
Yeah. Send us your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 30th of September, and these are the stories we've been covering so far this morning. Conservative MPs demanding that taxes must not rise before the next election, but will that be enough to ease things at the Tory party conference in Manchester? Earlier, we spoke to the chairman of the Conservative Party, Sir Jake Berry.
All too often, we have seen these promises and pledges made by MPs across the political divide that haven't materialised. That is why this tax pledge is different. It isn't connected to the Conservative Party. It is a direct pledge from me and my constituents in Rossendale and Darwen and to the British people that I will not vote.
There's more misery on the railways today as members of ASLEF walk out on strike again. Earlier, we spoke to Transport Secretary Mark Harper. He insisted the latest pay offer is more than fair and should be put to union members.
Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of that union, won't put that offer to the members. He sits on the Labour Party's national executive, and timing the strike for the Conservative conference can be seen for what it is. It's a political strike, and I think he should put the reasonable offer on the table to his members.
Well, we did speak to the General Secretary of ASLEF, Mick Whelan.
We haven't seen Mark Harper since January of last year, when he took over and he told me that the Rail Minister was going to facilitate talks. Before those talks took place, they put out an offer that we hadn't seen that ripped up every term.
And etiquette experts say society is adopting new rules for making a phone call, such as always texting before you call and avoiding speakerphones in public. Have you made changes?
Keeping safe on the roads in Northern Ireland is a new scheme for children tours schools.
We like to reinforce and try and come here and build that picture to give these kids a sense of reality of what it's actually like to be involved in these road traffic collisions.
And Aidan, of course, has your weather.
It's a bright start for most of us this weekend, but not everyone will see that weather lasting. Find out when and where the rain turns up later today in the full forecast.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, a lot of you are not very impressed with these tax pledges that are being made. Paul says, why did those MPs sign the pledge for no more tax rises, vote for tax rises in the first place? Well, they may not have done.
They may not have.
We don't know that they did. You'd have to go through each individual member, but they may not have done.
Alison says this pledge smacks of desperation. Where the heck have they been for the last 13 years? Now that they could be losing their jobs, they're coming out with no tax rises, stop the war on motorists, etc. I don't buy it.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough one, isn't it? The Conservatives are trying to create some clear blue water between them and the Labour Party as we gear up for a general election. Could be as early as sort of May next year. And so this could be the last party conference that they're going to see before the next election. It's the day before, of course. A lot of people are heading there to Manchester, but it is clearly making the headlines this morning.
Yes, and all eyes, of course, are on the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, after more than 30 Tory MPs that we've been talking about there signed that pledge to their constituents, saying that they will never again vote for an increase in taxes.
Well, those who signed include GB News presenter Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg and former Cabinet Minister Sir Jake Berry, who we spoke to already this morning.
And all of this pressure comes as the Institute for Fiscal Studies found that this government will have overseen the largest set of tax rises since the Second World War.
Well, the Chancellor has said he wants to stop the vicious circle of ever-rising taxes.
All too often, we have seen these promises and pledges made by MPs across the political divide that haven't materialised. That is why this tax pledge is different. It isn't connected to the Conservative Party. It is a direct pledge from me and my constituents in Rossendale and Darwen and to the British people that I will not vote to put taxes up. It's for good. It's for keeps. It is a pledge that I will stick to as long as I am a Member of Parliament.
And these are MPs, and there's enough of them
there's more than 33 or 34 saying, if you go ahead, we won't vote for them. That could be enough to vote down the government's working majority. It's a big challenge to Rishi Sunak. It's a big challenge to Jeremy Hunt.
He hasn't got much fiscal wiggle room and much room for manoeuvre. You know, government borrowing in the 5 months to August was 40% higher than the same time last year. So the government really is pretty cash strapped. I don't think Jeremy Hunt is going to unveil any tax cuts here at the party conference in Manchester.
We've got to make sure that inflation comes down. Interest rates have been frozen now for the next quarter. So seeing interest rates come down to help people with borrowing and mortgages, that should be the next step. So when that starts to happen, and as we see the economy growing, as it has done in the last couple of months, then you can start to say, look, we're doing a good job, we're sticking to the plan, we're getting the economy back on track, and now we can start to look at tax cuts.
Well, I mean, Linny's been in touch. Hi, Linny. Government's talking about no more tax rises. Will this mean council tax rises? Something the government never seems to mention.
True. But that is local government, isn't it?
It is.
John in Preston says it's a ridiculous pledge and it needs to be shown up for what it is. They're trying to gain support before a general election. That's what they do, I guess, isn't it?
Yes, but is that a reason to disagree with it? Because do we want to see more tax rises?
No.
Surely not.
It's a very clear signal, though, to Jeremy Hunt during this conference, isn't it? There will be little revolts here and there. It'll be an interesting conference, I think, because, yes, they are a party that desperately need to find a way to win the next election. They're on the back foot, really, aren't they?
Oh, very much so.
And I think even if you don't hear it in the big speeches, all of the meetings that go on in the evenings and things like that, there's going to be little pockets of revolution.
Jeremy Hunt has been very clear. I mean, he's said it on this channel before. You know, I desperately want to reduce taxes, but I can't do it at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's the other equation. We can all sit here and say, well, yeah, we want lower taxes. Who wouldn't? But can we afford to do it at the moment? And the answer to that would appear to be no.
Not yet.
Not yet, but when?
Yeah.
Because it is crippling people. The tax burden for the nation is 37%.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Not since 1948 has it been that high. And that is progress? Gosh, no. But we have been through extraordinary times just in the last few years, haven't we?
We have. Can we blame that for everything, though?
No, we can't go on blaming it for everything, can we? No. And a good government, you would think, I mean, they are the ones who ask us to vote for them, a good government should be able to cope.
Mind you, I guess there's also the argument to say it all stems back to 2008, the subprime mortgage market. Do you remember all of that, all the crash, and the austerity time that came in there? And we were told then we'd be paying it off for donkey's years, and then we've had another crisis in 2020 and 2021. So maybe this is all just adding up.
But I come back to it. If you want to be in the business of government, then you should be clever enough to sort this out. That's what we vote you in for.
Well, yeah, good idea. The issue, which I think is but that highlights the problem that we face when we come to the general election, isn't it? Because no party actually is coming forward with an idea to say how they will sort this out. Labour can be as critical as they like, the Lib Dems can be as critical as they like as to what the government's doing, but they're not actually coming up with a solution. So there you go.
However, on much more important things, you were saying you like cheese, pineapple and jalapeno. Jalapeno on your pizza. Jalapeno.
Oh, do you say jalapeno?
Jalapeno. I don't know how you meant to say it. Sandra says Pizza Hut do that. Very nice.
Oh, do they?
So yeah. Obviously, that's your pizza, the Stephen Dixon special.
Oh, well, there you go. Thanks, Pizza Hut. Jill in Southport...
Order one now. Get on your phone and order one.
Oh, I'd love a pizza. It's not on my diet plan. Jill in Southport says, I love pineapple on a pizza. In France one year, I saw something called a pizza exotique. It was ham, artichoke, banana and prunes, and it was lovely. It sounds disgusting,
All right.
I have to say.
Connor says, how about this for disgusting then? A sandwich made with bacon and jam. He says it's really good.
I can't imagine that.
A bacon and jam sandwich. See, there's savoury and sweet.
I've heard of bacon jam.
What's bacon jam?
It's like, I suppose it's like a bacon relish, is it, that's a bit sweet?
I like sweet corn relish.
Oh, yeah.
I love sweet corn relish on a burger.
Can you tell we're hungry?
Yes, sorry. Yes, we must move on.
Let's set it off. Yes, let's have a look at some of the other stories. Heading into the newsroom at 9:10.
And the teenage girl who died after a school coach crashed on the M53 motorway has now been named by police, Jessica Baker. The driver also died. Police confirmed a total of 58 people were involved in the incident. 4 children taken to hospital, and a 14-year-old boy is said to have life-changing injuries.
And the Prime Minister has said he's slamming the brakes on harebrained schemes like blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limits and low-traffic neighbourhoods. He's been talking to The Sun, and he vowed to focus on policies that stem a relentless attack on motorists. We're expecting more details to be announced at Tory Party conference on Monday.
And then, meanwhile, Boris Johnson has said that delaying or cutting the HS2 route to Manchester will be a betrayal of the north of England. The former Prime Minister said we must be out of our minds if Conservative ministers are considering axing the northern legs of the high-speed rail project. Mr Johnson's comments come as the party prepares to meet in Manchester, of course, for its annual autumn conference. Now, there is somebody who will be holding lots of little conferences of his own, don't you think?
It'll be a nightmare at conference for members of the government, I should think. I'm torn on HS2 as a northerner. I was all for it, even though there's a load of protests, loads of people who aren't happy with it at all. We're going to talk to one a little bit later on this hour. But I thought, no, let's have a proper high-speed connection. Let's do it. Let's make it work. And now that it's only... They haven't confirmed it, but you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to stop at Birmingham now. I sort of think, well, just pull the plug.
Yeah.
Just pull the plug. What's the
There
point?
are already fast trains from London to Birmingham, aren't there?
Yeah.
Very fast
And
trains.
in fact, it's going to be slower if you have to go to Old Oak Common, whatever it's called.
I mean, that's stupid.
I just can't get my head around it.
How much have we spent on it already?
I don't know.
I mean, I know that they
Billions.
upped the budgetary figure to 100 million, didn't they?
100 billion.
100 billion, sorry, yes. Whether they've actually spent that yet or not. But I just think we're a civilised country. We should have a really good railway system. And that was what was promised. And it should go from London to Manchester as promised.
And Manchester to Leeds, and Leeds to Hull, and all these sort of, you know, it's what you need. It's what it was meant to do.
Yeah.
It's not doing any of it now. It's going from somewhere outside of the capital to Birmingham.
I can't understand that. How does that make any sense at all?
And it's one thing Mick Whelan, the boss of ASLEF, told us earlier on, when he said if they'd had any sense, they would have started on the south coast and the north, and then they would have met in the middle.
Grown it together.
Because then there's no way of sort of cancelling it halfway then. It just has to be done then.
Should we cancel the whole project, all that money wasted, or should we just get on and build it, even though it's going to cost a fortune? In 20 years' time, we will be glad we did.
I don't know that we will, if it's only going to Birmingham.
No, it should go to Manchester. It should.
No, I'm torn.
It opens up everything. Young people who can't afford to live in the south would actually be able to easily get jobs in the north, where houses are cheaper, where all sorts of, you know, it makes absolute sense to connect the north and south of the country. Everybody talks about this awful north-south divide. The whole idea was it was meant to knit the two together. And now we just give up. It's crazy.
Yeah, I just don't know. If you've got any clear ideas on that, let us know this morning. Meanwhile, sticking on the rails, members of the train drivers' union ASLEF walking out again today in that long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions.
And, of course, the strikes are timed to hit the Tory party conference in Manchester, which sort of begins tomorrow. And another strike has been planned for next Wednesday, when they'll all want to go home.
Earlier, we spoke to the Transport Secretary. He said that offers had been put to the union. They needed to put them now to their members.
At the moment, the strike that's taking place today, it's clearly a political strike, timed to coincide with the Conservative Party conference. You don't have to think very carefully to see that's the case. But look, there's a fair offer on the table. Train drivers get paid an average salary of £60,000 for a full-day, 35-hour week. The pay rise that's on the table that they won't put to their members would take that average salary to £65,000 a year. Now, look, I think most of your viewers will look at that and think that is actually quite fair and reasonable. It's effectively being funded from the taxpayer, because the rail industry at the moment, post-COVID, is financially not sustainable. So we've got to deliver a fair and reasonable pay rise with essential reforms, and that's what's on the table, and that's what I hope ASLEF will put to their members, rather than carrying out what is effectively a political strike this weekend.
Well, that's one side of the argument. Meanwhile, the General Secretary of ASLEF, Mick Whelan, told us that the government needs to remove what he called Victorian conditions from their current offer.
These aren't modernisation, they're Victorian terms and conditions. And if they truly want those terms and conditions, they're going to have to pay for them. Nobody's going to give up hundreds of millions of pounds of productivity for effectively a 20% pay cut. We haven't had a pay rise in 5 years. And there is no train driver in the country that would vote for it. Now, what they have voted for, because of the bad faith of the companies and the government, is serially 3 times 92 to 99% for action short of a strike and for strike action, because that's their voice saying they reject the deals that are out there.
Well, joining us from outside Euston Station is our national reporter, Theo Chikomba. Morning, Theo. What's going on there now?
Yes, well, good morning to you. I've just been inside the Euston Station just a few moments ago, and it's completely deserted. The only trains leaving here are heading toward Watford Junction. Normally here people can travel across the country, but today that isn't possible as this industrial action is taking place. ASLEF union members have said, as inflation is increasing or has been going up in the last year or so, our wages aren't going up in line with inflation, which they say is a real terms pay cut. In terms of what's going to happen over the next few days, as you've mentioned, there's further strike dates taking place next week, and there's also going to be an overtime ban. But from tomorrow, when train services resume, Network Rail say they will start at a slightly later time just to account for what's been happening today. Of course, you mentioned as well this weekend as well, the Conservative Party conference is taking place in Manchester, and this will have an impact particularly for those who want to travel towards the northwest, and when they return as well next week, Wednesday. This comes at a time when RMT union members will also be striking next week, and Underground will also be on strike here in the capital. For those wanting to get to football matches, see family, friends, events and so on, today is going to be tricky, and the advice is to check before you travel. Now, this comes at a time as well when there are conversations about modernising the rail services. For example, in some rural areas, there's less staff there, and you have to rely on some of the technology that is there. And if it's not working, then you are left with nothing. And that is already being seen in some parts of the country. But of course, the argument is that there is modernisation which is needed alongside these conditions, which the ASLEF union members say simply aren't good enough at the moment.
Theo, thanks very much indeed. Matt in Portsmouth has been in touch, says that bus drivers have to cope with aggressive passengers, traffic and lots of stress, and only get paid a fraction of what train drivers get. Train drivers should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. But Sue says it isn't about pay, it's about the working conditions. Driver-only trains are not acceptable or safe. Anne follows on that one. So it's not the pay, it's the conditions. The government blaming the drivers and unions, but it's the higher-ups that won't come to the negotiating table. It's Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, who won't be there. Steve says, I'm sorry, but they're simply greedy and anti-conservative.
Are they really? Or do they have a very good point?
Yeah, well...
We need our train drivers, same as at the moment we really need our bus drivers.
Well, we do. Mick Whelan was telling us, which, again, you forget these details, don't you? They've not had a pay rise in 5 years. It's a long time not to have a pay rise.
And it's a long time not to have met the other side of the argument, Mark Harper, they haven't seen for 1 year. How are we meant to expect any sort of movement if the two sides aren't meeting? It's cold weather to be stuck there in a picket line as well, isn't it? Shall we see if it's getting any better? Let's get the weather now from Aidan.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before Rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland. Lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon with just a few showers for northwest Scotland and a fresh breeze here. Still some warmth, though, in the southeast.
Yeah, well, good enough if you're in the southeast. I should need to pay more attention when Aidan's on, actually.
Yes, you should.
See where it's happening where I live. Anyway, look, we've been talking about HS2 this morning, well, all week, really, because we're expecting, actually, an announcement on HS2, possibly this weekend. Is it going to go ahead? Is it going to stop at Birmingham? What on earth is happening? So we're looking at it in a bit more detail in News Matters next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now at 9:25, one of the biggest stories this week, and believe you me, it's going to continue into next, is the future of HS2 and whether that northern leg to Manchester, it's meant to be two northern legs originally, one was meant to go to Leeds. Anyway, that's all gone for a Burton. Anyway, will it even go to Manchester now? We don't know.
And will the bottom even get as far as Euston? Possibly not. Now, you know that earlier on we spoke to Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of ASLEF, and of course we were talking about the strike, but we also asked him what he thought of what's happening with HS2.
Population, we need more capacity, not less. If we actually do want to deliver any of Kyoto, Paris or the 1%, we need HS2 in full to free up the capacity on the west coast, the east coast for freight alone. Never mind what it will do for regional railways and interurban railways across the country.
It's a shame they started that drill while he was making that point, but never mind.
Perfect timing. Well, of course, we are expecting an announcement, really, let's be honest with you, we're told to expect something today. Whether we'll get it or not, we can't guarantee. But anyway, we spoke to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, and asked him then what was going on with HS2. He wouldn't comment. The whole point of the project was to connect parts of the north, which isn't now happening, but also connect the north and the south. It looks like it's going to go from somewhere outside of London to Birmingham. So, yeah, we would expect you to comment on that.
Well, look, at the moment, that's just speculation. We're getting on with delivering it. And as I said, what I'm here today is focusing on our plan for drivers, which is how most people in the country get around and carry out their lives. And I think that's what most people will think is the priority for the government.
So are you saying then you're going to abandon HS2 in favour of motorists and roads?
No, I'm saying that I'm not going to comment on speculation, and I'm here focusing on our plan for drivers, which is about making sure that people can get about more easily. Well, no, the speculation is from the media. When the government has something to say, if it has something to say, we'll say it in the usual way.
Well, there you go. We spoke to ASLEF with their view on HS2. We spoke to Mark Harper, who wouldn't have a view on HS2. Let's try again, then. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, spoke to the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who explained that scrapping HS2 would be a betrayal of the north of England.
Would Labour build this northern leg?
I've had reassurances that they will, and I'm really encouraged. Well, from
Rachel Reeves, let's name them.
Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Hay in the region yesterday. We have a commitment around Northern Powerhouse Rail, which I keep coming back to is the critical thing as far as I'm concerned. We want both. Let me be really clear about this. Why should we be forced to choose between having an east-west line or a north-south line? London's never been forced to choose. It gets the Elizabeth line, it gets HS2. They're coming to Manchester in a few days' time. What have they got to say to us? You know, they promised to level us up when they stood for election here. Are they really coming north to say, well, that was a pack of lies?
And just finally on HS2, what are your options if it is axed the northern leg in the autumn statement or before that? Legal action?
Well,
challenging the
all
courts?
I can say is, for 15 years or more, many people in the Greater Manchester system have been working hard at the government's request to bring through these plans. We've devoted hours and hours and hours of time. All of our development plans are linked to it. If they pull the plug, they are ripping the heart out of the economic development plan for Greater Manchester and parts of the north. So all options would absolutely be on the table.
Well, what do you think should happen? I mean, I have to say...
Especially as so much money has already been spent.
Yeah, but do we just cut our losses or do we keep spending? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. what to do about it now. Someone who's been campaigning to stop HS2 I don't know how she feels this morning. Let's ask her. Caroline Thompson-Smith joins us now. It's good to see you this morning. I'm a bit torn as to quite what to ask you, Caroline, because there's all this talk about what is going to happen with HS2. What seems certain is, whatever else, it will go from London somewhere to Birmingham. So where you've been campaigning against it, it's guaranteed to happen.
I'm not so sure about that. And if you would speak to local residents around here, and please bear in mind, this is not a NIMBY argument here, a NIMBY argument, I should say, because the impact that HS2 will have is national scandal, not only financially, but in terms of the embedded carbon. I just want to dispel one myth straight away, is that HS2 is not green transport. It is not carbon zero. It will never be net zero. After 120 years, there will still be 1.45 million embedded tonnes of carbon. That will never be recouped. And if that line goes only from Old Oak Common to Curzon Street, not from central London to central Birmingham, but to the outskirts, that carbon case will be even worse. Not only will the carbon case be worse, but the financial case, the business case, will be worse. HS2 relies upon 1,500 passengers per train, 18 trains an hour each way for 15 hours a day. Where are these people going to come from to get onto HS2, to make that financial case, to make that carbon case? It was only in July that the Infrastructure and Projects Authority said that HS2 was not deliverable in its current form. And the Public Accounts Committee have consistently rated HS2 as amber or red, meaning that it is very poor value for money. And people around here, they see their lives have been upturned and devastated. And please, Anne, I beg you, please don't say that we'll be glad it's built when we've got it. We won't, because the general population will never be able to afford a ticket on HS2. The average taxpayer will be paying £7,700 towards HS2 to finance it. The general person will never be able to ride on HS2. And also, we won't be glad about it, because if you said that to any of the people that live around here whose lives are being devastated and turned upside down, businesses that have been lost, farmland that's been possessed, homes that have been demolished. I know of 2 people locally who have died prematurely, having their homes possessed, having their business possessed. One chap from a stroke, one lady from a heart attack. These are the stories that you do not hear. Local people who are suffering mental health issues because of the impact that this project is having on their lives.
But Caroline, can I just put it to you? When our kids are grown up in 20, 30 years' time, isn't there a danger they're going to look at this sort of crumbling rail network full of really old stock that doesn't really deliver what you need, what a civilised country needs in 30-odd years' time? And they're going to say, why didn't we build HS2? At least that would be a modern, up-to-date system.
Well, interestingly, HS2 is already outmoded technology. So I actually thought you were describing HS2 at first there, because HS2 is outmoded technology. So in 20 years' time, when they believe it may be finished, and it's continually running behind schedule, and continually, I speak to workers, and they laugh at the idea of it even being ready by 2041. It will already be outmoded technology. So if we want to invest in our future, let's invest in our current railways. When we talk about levelling up the North-South divide, here's an idea. Instead of sinking yet more money into HS2, and by the way, do you know how much money is being spent each week on HS2?
Tell us.
£136 million per week is being spent on HS2. That's horrific. Forget the sunk cost. It's been spent, it's been providing men with jobs, although those jobs have been decimating our countryside. And in the very week that our nation is up in arms over the vandalism of one sycamore tree, think about the thousands and thousands of trees of national and significant importance, such as the Covington pear tree, a national tree, the second largest wild tree, pear tree in the country was taken down by HS2. It's appalling. So I was going to talk about levelling up the north and south. Let's spend that money instead on doubling the number of primary schools in this country, because that's what HS2 money could bring us. That would, and Andy Burnham, I disagree with him. Let's invest in our future. Let's increase the number of primary schools. Let's put in some high-speed broadband. These things could be done at a fraction of the price, would create jobs. HS2 doesn't create jobs, it shifts jobs from elsewhere. There's just a handful of jobs created by HS2.
But look, when it comes to the question as to when it comes to the question as to whether we get rid of HS2 or not, and obviously there are different sides to that argument. How far along is HS2? I live not that far away from you, I think, and you do see a lot of infrastructure already in. So when we're talking about Curzon Street to Old Oak Common, well, there is near where I am. You've got to ask, can we scrap that stage or not, or is it too far gone?
I don't believe that it is too far gone. I wish actually I'd been able to take this Zoom call from just down the road, but interestingly, I can't even get a decent phone signal there, much less a broadband signal. So if we're talking about some green infrastructure, let's forget HS2, let's provide homes with some broadband internet so people can be working from home effectively. I was staggered recently when Grant Shapps said, the large proportion of HS2 is completed. What does that mean exactly? Give us some facts, not these broad brushstrokes. Not 1 centimetre of track has been laid. And again, talking to local residents recently, they would love to see the track, this horrible scar that has been created by the devastation of triple SIs, of nature reserves, of ancient woodlands. Let's rewild it. Let's give it back to the public, or give it back to landowners if they want it. Let's rewild that. Let's put it back. We'll never get it back as it was, because ancient woodland is irreplaceable. It cannot be replaced. Okay, Caroline, but let's
final thing then. The government, we are told there will be an announcement on this today, actually, we're told. What would you want them to say?
I would want them to say, we have been arrogant, we've been ignorant, we've lied to the public on so many issues regarding HS2, we've disregarded the individual impact that it would have for people that live along this route, that's lives have been turned upside down and will be for another 20 years during its construction. It's a complete waste of money. It was a vanity project. It never was a green infrastructure project. It was never about capacity. It was never about any of these things. These were retrospective justifications because somebody had a brilliant idea of having this super duper shiny train. We're going to scrap the whole thing. We've got it. You,
Caroline. They're not going to say any of that.
No, they're not going to say that.
They're not going to say any of that.
Well, they don't say that, but I really hope they say we're going to scrap the whole thing. Yeah, we're going to do something better instead. We're going to take on some of my ideas about broadband and primary schools.
Well, you never know.
Well, that's an interesting one. It really is.
Really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Wow, she puts forward a very, very powerful argument.
I mean, it is interesting, though, when you talk about the... I mean, she's saying, not a single centimetre of track has been laid. Maybe not, but you can see where the track's going to go.
She said big scar right through the country.
But, I mean, is that... And a lot of it's sort of concrete lined and things. Can that be sorted out if you weren't going to do it?
Rewilding it? I mean, I cannot see the point in going ahead with just Old Oak Common to outside Birmingham. I can't see the point of that.
It's like a branch line.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's all we're ever going to get, then I would say scrap it and do exactly what Caroline said. Rewild it, build some primary schools.
Labour says it's all going to go... The Labour seem to be saying that it's all good. If they got into power, they would continue with it all the way to Manchester. I mean, the trouble is, that would keep a lot of people happy, but not people like Caroline.
No.
You can't... I mean, as I keep saying all morning... I don't know. I couldn't make... If the choice was down to me, I wouldn't know what to do on that one. £100 billion?
It's a lot
of money.
Not even... That's just to Birmingham, isn't it?
No, I think that's...
Is that the whole thing?
That's the whole thing. At the current cost, it could well go up even more, and it's going to take another 20 years.
I tell you what, if you listen to the this sort of mood music coming from the government, they're not going to announce that it's going to go all the way.
No, they're not.
They're
No.
not.
Not a hope in hell.
So it's either going to be Old Oak Common to Birmingham or scrapping it completely. I wouldn't want to put any money on either way, would you?
No. Anyway, look, we'll be investigating, talking about this for quite some time to come. Have no fear about that. We're going to take a short break, but then we're back with the headline makers in a few minutes.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It is 9:43 and time for a very special 4th edition of Headline Makers.
Yeah.
That's what you get on a Saturday with journalist and author Ella Whelan and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both.
Morning. Ella, you've been looking at Rishi Sunak's chances of road back to victory.
Yes, well, I mean, we've had these, over the last few weeks, quite dramatic announcements from the Prime Minister about a change of direction, and very clearly and openly quite a few Conservative MPs sort of gearing up for a general election and trying to entice voters. And the Mail has done a poll of a small poll, about 1,000 people, a snapshot between the 28th and 29th of September, asking them their position on various issues, HS2, tax cuts, small boats. And it's quite a mixed bag. So 60% back the Rwanda plan. That's what the Mail's gone with.
60% of whom?
60% of these
Of us?
polled.
Of those polled.
So it depends who they've polled.
Well, it does.
Which they don't go into detail about. But the interesting thing is that they're running with that, but it's actually much more mixed for the Prime Minister. So, for example, people seem to be preferring Keir Starmer. They think that he would make the better Prime Minister by about almost about 10%. Rishi Sunak isn't doing so well as Prime Minister at the moment, they say. But also, there's tax is never interesting.
No, but hold on a minute, though. That's interesting in itself. If 60% of those people asked in this particular survey back the Rwanda plan, but they also prefer Keir Starmer as leader, they're not going to... I mean, but that's a confusing picture.
It does seem contradictory because obviously Labour's plans in relation to immigration and the way that they've talked about the European Convention of Human Rights, for example, are markedly different. But I think this is, I mean, whether or not this is in terms of personality or what else, Rishi Sunak still hasn't, I mean, Keir Starmer's not got much in terms of personality, in my opinion. Yeah. But there is still this discrepancy. But I just wanted to pick up on the tax question, because obviously there is this discussion about whether or not Tory voters want tax to be slashed, what kind of movement there needs to be. In actual fact, this poll suggests that most people generally think it should remain the same. So I think there should be some caution in the process of party conference and what comes out of that, and any moves towards the next election. Big announcements and big promises, as we know with Rishi Sunak's pledges, don't necessarily win you votes.
No. Candice?
It's a confusing picture. I mean, if I was in the Conservative Party, I would find that very difficult to interpret. I mean, one way you could look at it is that a lot of the messaging around Keir Starmer being a flip-flopper, is that cutting through? Are people actually thinking that he is, or that he's unreliable on the EU, or do they value him, for instance, on the NHS, because that poll says they trust him more on the NHS? Or are people just so disillusioned with the Conservatives at the moment that it's going to be very difficult for Rishi Sunak to win back their confidence? I think it's a very complex picture.
I think it sounds like, doesn't it, that even those people who you would sort of generally describe as more to the right are still saying we're fed up and we want to change.
I know, and that is a sort of ineffable thing. It's just the mood of the time that's very difficult to manage. People just think, let's have a change.
Yeah.
Well, also, I mean, the Conservatives themselves are a lot of them, in the way in which they're talking about the future, are almost giving away the fact that they've given up. I mean, lots of them are sort of privately saying, we need a period of time in opposition, we've made such a hash of it over the last few years, we need to, get our house in order before we actually get back into government properly. So I think people can pick up on that.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I tell you what, though, that will infuriate a lot of you watching and listening, who say, no, it's all, this is, someone messaged me earlier on saying it's all anti-Tory rhetoric. It's realism, actually, because we all know a lot of MPs from all parties, and the Tory ones, I mean, they're saying to me, well, we're not going to get in.
And also, don't you have to ask, how moral is it for them to have done 13 years and to ask for another 4? And that's a heck of a long time for one party to be in government.
Well, if it's a moral question, you can't morally expect a government to say, right, we've had our time now, we're going to stop.
Well, no, but we make that decision, don't we?
Well, I think the test will be not what kind of headline pledges you make, but the substantial issue of what's happening with the economy, what's happening with borders. And it has to be said that as much as I've just, quite rightly, I think, criticised the Conservative Party, I don't think there's a huge amount of enthusiasm for Labour. It's going to be, I think, one of those depressing elections where people look at both sides and say, there's not much going on here. Who am I going to force myself to put my ex down for?
There is a sense of that, isn't there? Because, I mean, what are Labour offering that the Tories aren't particularly?
I think that is so true. I mean, people are just going to go into that election and they're going to say, oh, it's just the best of a bad bunch. I wonder, though, can things change? Can the mood change before the Conservatives call the election? And I wonder when they will call the election, will they drag it out as long as they possibly can? Or they go for May next year, as so many people are saying, and possibly, cut taxes right before? Who knows?
May is what they're talking about in the House of Commons.
I reckon too. Yes. I reckon May.
Yes.
Because we'll all be looking forward to the summer. And there'll be an air of optimism, which there isn't, going into autumn or winter.
I've no idea. You sort of think, I've no idea what I would want the outcome to be. I don't know what's best for... When you sort of look at what is going to be best for the country, I have no idea. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't know. really don't know.
I think that a lot of the time you can make momentum out of the idea that people need change. And even though we have had technically sort of change within the Conservative Party because there's been change of leaders, change of positions, I just said musical chairs in one of the last rounds. But in terms substantially of policy, actually Labour and Conservatives have, despite this recent sort of rowing on net zero, Rishi Sunak's still completely committed to net zero, just a longer time frame. The two parties are closer than they ever have been. In relation to the economy, big questions on energy, big questions on sort of infrastructure. It's very similar.
And solving the boats
and actually, in terms of external parties, OK, you have the Greens, you've got Lib Dems, but there's Reform, Reclaim, nobody really cares about them. There's very little competition.
Yeah, then I don't think we're going to make a lot of headway.
OK, from a huge political perspective then, let's talk about the plight of one tree.
No, and this has really captured people, this tree that was just mindlessly cut down. And I think that's why people are so upset about the Sycamore Gap, because it is just mindless. Why would someone do that? What would the point be of cutting it down? I mean, it's just this beautiful thing that you enjoy. The Times is saying that apparently Anthony Gormley, the artist, the person who did the Angel of the North and the figures on the beach, he's been approached to do something. Because, I mean, there's a bit of debate about what replaces it.
Do you know what? Someone emailed in yesterday and said, why don't they replace it with a metal replica?
Yes, so he was saying he's actually opposed to that. He says, no, we'll just let it regrow. That will take quite a long time.
Oh, yes.
Obviously, it will have lost what it was, which was a very old tree. Whatever is in its place, it will take many years before it has that sort of poetic resonance again.
I think it would be lovely if there was something erected there to mark it and to look beautiful as well.
Well, because it wasn't just a beautiful tree; it was a historical sort of thing, that actually had some permanence. I mean, there is so much rumour, and I know that my husband, who's a tree surgeon's WhatsApps are going mad thinking about whether or not you could have had someone who was so young, who's one of the people embroiled in the alleged case, do this quite skilled cut, and it does raise quite interesting...
That's what I thought. That's what your husband says. Yeah, it was a very clean cut. Yeah, whoever wielded that chainsaw knew what they were doing.
I think that's probably most people will agree on that. It wouldn't just be some fly-by-night person.
Also,
no, but I tell you what, we have got to be a little bit careful because a 60-year-old man has now been arrested.
Yeah, but can I just ask? Your husband would know this. You can't just wield and cut. You have to be really careful where the tree falls.
Yeah, there's a wedges go in and you lever it. But the interesting thing about this is that obviously I don't think it's just a mindless act of who knows, but I think it's unlikely to be a mindless act of vandalism. It plays into this row that's happening across the country in tourist hotspots of a sort of rural-urban thing where people living it's happening in Dartmoor in the southwest at the moment, where people come for a holiday somewhere, they take lots of pictures, they go for tourism, and locals can be quite sort of tense about it or not like it. That's not to say that it's right to vandalise your own back garden to turn away tourists. But there is this tension. It's happening across Europe in various cities, Barcelona, places like that. Tourism adds to a place, it also takes away a certain amount.
It does.
And that's an interesting debate.
If you go to YouTube and you put in the tree, up comes the clip from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, straight away.
Oh, really?
It's trending, as they say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just beautiful places like that, like Wistman's Wood as well, on Dartmoor. It's on Dartmoor. And that's one of the ancient rainforests that still survives to this day.
It's a rainforest on Dartmoor?
Yes, an ancient rainforest, one of the very few. It's tiny.
Oh.
And you can go there. But they've banned people going in there now because apparently during the lockdown people were taking the moss for hanging baskets, so they don't trust people to go in there anymore now.
Isn't it odd? We do sort of destroy what we love in all of this. I don't know how we get around it, though, because it's a bit like with the lakes, where I'm from, and it's beautiful. But there are times you just wish the tourists would go away and leave it to us.
Yeah, well,
that's not fair.
But it's not fair, and actually the local economies would collapse. But sometimes...
Have you seen the bicycle tree? There's a tree here.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's in Scotland, and it's a tree that grew around a bicycle that was planted there by a young man who went off to war.
Went off to war, changed his bike.
He changed his bike to the tree, and of course he never came back. And the tree has grown around the bike.
Just a natural artwork.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I just find I find that tree so upsetting.
Yes, because I mean, you know, it would have become older than he was. Actually.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Trees are wonderful things, aren't they?
They are wonderful.
They've seen history. That one was 300 years old. I think you just think of the history it's seen.
I always think that when I look at a tree. How old is it?
Yeah.
Because they can seen. I know. Have you ever seen the giant redwoods in California?
Oh no, but I'd like to.
Oh, I'd like to see those too.
That is like a mystical experience. That is an absolutely incredible experience. When I was in San Francisco years ago, we did it, and you're just looking at something that is truly ancient.
And there are some there that have roads going through the middle of them, don't they?
Yeah, I didn't go there.
Trees?
Through the tree. The tree has a sort of arc in it.
Yes.
And there's a road that goes right through the middle of the tree.
See, that's vandalism in and of itself.
No, I don't think it is. I think
What
it's
has been a
like
mystical and magical experience is having you two on the show this
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Don't go anywhere. That is it from us. We'll see you at 6. But Esther and Phil are here with Saturday Morning with a special guest broadcaster in a moment.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's certainly a fresh start out there this morning, but a bright start for most of us before rain and wind move into central parts by the afternoon. Best of the sunshine remaining through the morning across northern Scotland, lighter winds compared with yesterday and fewer showers. We've also got sunny skies continuing into the afternoon through parts of eastern England, East Midlands, southern England, southeast Wales. Elsewhere, cloud and, soon enough, outbreaks of rain move in. That rain heavy and persistent for Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, North Wales, accompanied by a strong wind, coastal gales possible through the Irish Sea, making it feel unpleasant. But where we've got the sunny skies to the southeast and the north of Scotland, a perfectly pleasant afternoon. The rain pushes north and east through the nights. Yeah, breaks up into bits and pieces of rainfall, so it won't be persistent everywhere. But this central swathe of the UK remains the wettest place. Towards the southeast, clear spells overnight and much warmer compared with the previous night, 16 or 17 Celsius because of the increased breeze from the south and southwest. Into Sunday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain clearing Shetland first thing. This zone of wetter weather across central parts pushes southeast and weakens into an area of light and patchy rain. Brighter skies emerge by the afternoon.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, All you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.